across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. I've been away for a couple of days and it's great to be back. Loads to discuss between now and 7 o'clock, including the asylum seekers using taxpayer-funded payment cards to gamble, the gang bosses and money movers sanctioned over small boats, and the London Borough offering half-price Lime bike rides, these bikes that you pay a bit of money for, to asylum seekers. Half price to asylum seekers. A host of other benefits to people who are asylum seekers. Also, the outrage as a luxury £425 a night hotel is paid for by you. It's been taken over by asylum seekers. It epitomises London's decline, we're hearing. Also, are the police ready for a summer of riots? Let's hope they don't happen, but if they do, are the police ready? Jeremy Corbyn doesn't seem to know what the name of his party is. We're also talking about an influencer mum's trip to Israel, triggering a referral to anti-radicalisation police. We'll find out why. We have an interview with her coming up. We'll talk to you as well. We'll talk about Britain being sued over climate change. Could that happen? And we'll get a sneak peek inside the Sun, as well as talking about Donald Trump being named in the Epstein files. Loads to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. I want to hear from you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, less than a minute please if you would. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. I'm Peter Cardwell. Drive is on between now and 7 o'clock. I'd love to hear from you on 0344 499 1000. Let's keep it talk until 7. Well, this huge controversy over what happened in Epping continues, and what we have is a chief constable of Essex Police saying one thing. We've got others saying other things. What actually happened? Well, what we do know for sure is that counter-protesters to those who were protesting, most of them peacefully, in regard to the Bell Hotel, most of them were protesting peacefully. Some not peacefully, and they have been arrested, and we'll see what happens there. But there were counter-protesters. So what actually happened with those counter-protesters? What we do know is that they were escorted to the site of that protest. Why? Still a mystery. The police have been asked about what they did, why they did it. We've also heard from the Chief Constable of Essex Police, who says he's not resigning.
If you're not apologising, are you going to follow the demands of some politicians in this country who have called you to resign over this?
No, I'm not. I'm not going to do that. And this is not about me. This is about the communities of Essex, is what I spoke about earlier. You know, the communities that are disrupted, the legitimate people who want to go and protest outside that hotel, and I make no observation of that view of that. If they're peaceful and lawful, they want to express their views, that is their right, and this is important that within the laws of this country that Essex Police allow that to take place. I come back to the point where people break the law, where they smash up police vans, where they assault workers from the hotel, where they are chasing people away. Those are the people that we will not tolerate.
That is Ben Julian Harrington there, who is the Chief Constable of Essex Police. The police have also been telling us what happened, or what their version of what happened in regard to driving people to that site.
I mean, there's been some accusation in the media that we drove people to the protest. That is not true. We have not driven anybody to that protest. People made their own way there. And of course, one of the accusations and one of the things circulated is we did take people away for their safety, for the safety of everyone there, because it was the best operational thing to do to prevent violence, to diffuse the situation. We drove them away from a violent confrontation.
The question is, how did they get there in the first place, and were they escorted there? Because it looks as if they were. Maybe the police brought them and walked them there. They may not have driven them, but it certainly looks as if they were escorted there. This controversy continues. This is what Nigel Farage has to say about it, the leader of Reform UK.
Have a look at this video.
If these are locals, why are they getting a police car? What time's the next bus? You wait 15 minutes for a bus and then 3 come all along at once. Look, they're all cramming in.
This shows Stand Up to Racism, as they're called, with Antifa, a violent, thuggish group, arriving at the train station and literally, by Essex Police, being bussed to the Bell Hotel. These were the people that caused the disturbances. These were the people that caused the riots. Essex police caused the disturbances. What on earth were Essex police thinking? Is it that they just hate so much ordinary residents determined to stand up for their own rights? I don't know the answer to that question. What I do know is what Essex police have done here is absolutely disgraceful. One of the most extraordinary acts I've seen from the police force in my lifetime. And for busing Antifa, oh, and by the way, many of them masked protesters, for doing this, heads must roll. There is no way the Chief Constable or the Police and Crime Commissioner in Essex can stay in their posts. This is a disgrace.
Well, the police, of course, denying Nigel Farage's charge there that they were bussed there. They weren't driven there, says the Chief Constable. He has denied that. There's lots more about Asylum around today. Asylum seekers caught using taxpayer-funded cards to gamble. A lot of detail on that. We'll get the views of Tony Smith on all of this. That's the former head of UK Border Force, Tony Smith, joins me now. Tony, thank you for joining me this afternoon. What are your thoughts on what happened in Essex?
Yeah, hi, Peter. Well, I'm not a former police officer. You'd need a police expert to discuss the intricacies of the operational orders that applied in that situation on that day. I think I'm going to talk probably more widely about the asylum support mechanisms and what's going on there, because I think what people are getting increasingly frustrated by, which is leading, of course, to these protests, is the fact that we are pretty well busing people, not necessarily busing people, but moving people very quickly from small boats through Manston into the communities and into hotels. Now, that, I think, is what is a major concern for many, many people as to why that should be happening.
And there's outrage specifically in regard, well, a couple of things actually. Let me bring in a couple of the stories that have emerged today. One is about a £425 a night hotel in Canary Wharf in East London, the Britannia International, boasting superb views over London. The hotel offers 2 restaurants and a bar, making it a perfect base for a city break. Amenities including a games room with a pool table and gym. Also, London Borough. This is Wandsworth, quite a large borough council in London, offering 50% of e-bike rentals to asylum seekers, courtesy of the taxpayer. They have all sorts of benefits with a card they're given, including a free baby box for first-time parents, half-price annual fishing permits, street parties, half of the cost for applying for a street party, half-price tickets to Battersea Park fireworks, half-price tickets to Wandsworth Panto. Oh yes, they are. I mean, there are so many people who look at this very straightforwardly and say there's no fairness here. There are people who have contributed absolutely nothing to this country who are being put up in a £425 a night hotel. The Bell Hotel wouldn't charge that amount of money, but at least some people at the Britannia Hotel in London are benefiting from that.
Yes, of course, people are angry. I mean, this all began, Peter, when I was in the Home Office about 20 odd years ago, actually, when we had very large numbers of people arriving in Dover on the ferries, if you remember that. And actually, they were camping on the beaches in Dover at that time. There was nowhere to put them. The Home Office set up the UK Border Agency National Asylum Support Service. So what are we going to do about this? I mean, where are these people going to go? We did commandeer quite a lot of bed and breakfasts along the south coast, and we set up this support service because our legal advice was that under Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights, we had an obligation to at least support and accommodate asylum seekers whilst they were here. Otherwise, we'd be subjecting them to inhuman or degrading treatment, you see. So that was interpreted in a way that the Home Office had to find somewhere to put them, somewhere to house them. It was never the intention to put people in hotels. There was negotiations went on across all of the country with local authorities where the Home Office had a budget to support and accommodate people who were destitute pending the consideration of their asylum application. But what's happened in recent years, Peter, is there have been so many asylum seekers turning up, particularly since the small boats arrival. The numbers are now at record levels, and frankly, the Home Office cannot cope with the numbers. They don't have the asylum accommodation available in the communities to place people. They're unable to clear the cases as quickly as they would like to because of endless representations from lawyers and solicitors about asylum and human rights. And meanwhile, the people have to have somewhere to stay. So their policy has been to increasingly use hotels. And I think that's what people are really fed up with.
Well, it's really interesting. I spoke to the Environment Secretary on Sunday, Steve Reid, and he said they're closing the hotels, they're getting a grip on this, they're sending people back, and he quoted the 40,000 figure, which they often do. I mean, it's about 10% of that, which is people who have been involuntarily removed. A lot of people have been told, right, your visas are gone, or you're not an asylum seeker legitimately, off you go, and they say, fine, I'm going. But in terms of people actually being removed from this country, it's more like 4,500. And in terms of closing those hotels, well, they're actually opening another one with this Britannia Hotel in London. Also, the bill for the asylum support bill, in fact, one person's been in touch and says, when will the country run out of money for all the handouts and benefits for migrants? Well, the annual asylum support bill is £4.7 billion. That is equivalent to the annual taxes forked out by a city the size of Manchester. This can't be right.
No, it's not right at all. But the problem, as I say, is that the Home Office has got a legal obligation, as things stand, to support and accommodate those people who arrive here claiming to be destitute.
There are many people, Tony, who would say that actually the Home Office shouldn't have that obligation, and actually if they didn't have that obligation, people would leave. Do you think that is correct or not?
It's part of the problem, but we've forgotten about immigration and border control in all of this, Peter. When I was an immigration officer, I'm going back a way now, if we found somebody in this country illegally, or somebody came or stayed illegally, then I would remove them. I had the power and authorities to do that. I had the power to arrest them, detain them, and serve notice of deportation. They'd be on a flight out the next day. This was back in the 70s and 80s, 30 years after the 51 conventions were signed. What we've lost is the legal framework to do that, Peter.
Why have we lost the legal framework? Is that because of human rights lawyers? Because we keep being told, right, we can't withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights. But my point with that is, well, its purpose is very different now to what it was originally, or even in the sort of middle period when you were doing those actions that you've just outlined there, Tony.
Yeah, it's called judicial overreach, but essentially there have been successive judgments in the European courts which have extended the definitions of what the ECHR means, and how it, to the point where it really defeats border control in many respects. I mean, if somebody turns up at the border now in Dover off a small boat, then they only have to claim asylum essentially, and the border force has lost the authority to remove them. They then have to take them into the country. I would like to detain them for much longer than we do. Manston is not a detention centre, it's a short-term holding facility, Peter. We can only hold people in Manston for 48 hours, and then the Home Office will be sued for unlawful detention if we hold them any longer than that.
It's just crazy. The system just doesn't work, and these people, I'm sorry, they have far too many rights. There are at least a quarter of them who are not here legitimately. 1 in 4. We hear this statistic that 76% of people are given asylum and are deemed to be correctly asylum seekers. So 1 in 4 people isn't. Yet they, for at least a long time, within that the processing delays that are there, they have far more rights than many people. I mean, there are many people in this country who don't have as many rights, as much of a recourse to public funds as they call it.
Yeah, and the fact is, Peter, of course, they're not immediately fleeing persecution.
Yeah, they're fleeing France.
France is a safe country, and ideally we should be saying, well, you're not fleeing persecution. There is an interpretation of Article 31 which says that. The previous government did try to implement that in the Illegal Migration Act, but were challenged every step of the way in the courts. But it's essentially that what Rwanda was all about, was, look, you are not immediately fleeing persecution in Iran, Eritrea, are you? You've come from France, you were safe there, you've chosen to come here, you are inadmissible to our asylum system, ergo we're going to send you back to somewhere else. If France won't take you, then we will send you to a country that is safe, ergo Rwanda. That plan, which took a lot of time and a lot of effort to build, was abolished immediately after the election, on the grounds that this government had a new plan, which was to smash the gangs. Now, they can only be measured, Peter, by the figures, and the figures speak for themselves, don't they? There are more and more people coming. I can detect from your program, from media, from social, everything. People are getting more and more fed up with this.
Yes.
It's becoming a major government problem because they are not focusing on removing asylum seekers. Those removal figures you mentioned there, they include people who've made a voluntary departure, people who we've just checked exit checks and found out without even touching them. The number of people being removed on small boats is still very small. The only dent, Peter, we ever made in those figures was against Albania because of the campaign 2 years against Albania, where we went to Albania and said, you will take these people back, you will treat them fairly and safely, won't you? And that is now a safe country, and you won't find any Albanians on the small boats. But for the rest of the nationalities that you see coming across, we don't have that agreement. We don't have Rwanda. We've got this one-to-one deal that apparently they've struck with the French. I've yet to see how that's going to work, but you have not got that removals deterrent. And all this would go away, Peter, if all of those people were arrested, detained and deported on arrival, which is what I think most people would like to see.
I think it would be perfectly reasonable, and I think that would have broad public support. Tony, thank you. That's Tony Smith there, former head of UK Border Force. Thank you to Jim. He says the French are in the same convention but seem to do nothing and ignore it. That's Jim in Nottinghamshire there. Peter in Suffolk says if we have to house them, why doesn't France have to? Russ in Leeds says don't all the other EU countries have the same obligations under the ECHR? We appear to be the only ones putting them up in luxury hotels. Well, this is the thing. There are lots of European countries that aren't part of the European Union, but they are part of the European Convention on Human Rights, which we have ignored before. Strasbourg said, you've got to give prisoners votes. David Cameron said, we're not doing that. We're not giving prisoners votes. We're ignoring the court. Guess what happened? Nothing, because it can't happen. This is not just about judges. This is about political will. This is about the government doing something about it, that it wants to do something about it. But of course, Keir Starmer will not, because he's Mr. Rule of Law all the time. And if a court says it, well, it must be true. Never mind the fact that he's a legislator and the Prime Minister. Lots of political stories around today. Police are not ready for a summer of unrest. Corbyn launching a hard left Your Party to challenge Starmer, but it's not called Your Party, apparently. It doesn't have a name yet, which is all a bit confusing. We'll get to the bottom of that. £6 billion India-UK trade deal, and Angela Rayner's staff's air miles, enough to go around the world 13 times. There's also a small fly that in this studio that I'm trying to kill, that I've managed to not do that. So at some point over the next 3 hours, I'm going to try and kill the fly because it's very annoying. But in the meantime, we will talk to Martina Bett, who's coming up in just a second. Stay with us.
We know that the Afghan interpreters stroke Afghan special forces numbered, 1,000 to 1,500 that worked alongside the British forces. And yet we're being told that 18,000 have come in under the cover of darkness. The British people are not stupid. We will always give a safe haven to those that need it. Look how generous the British people have been to the Ukrainians when the war broke out in Europe. It's in our nature to do that.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Magic Grandpa is back. Jeremy Corbyn has a new party. It's called Your Party, except it isn't called Your Party. It's all very confusing because he says fill in this form so that your party and the new party that develops of it from update you on news, activities and ways to get involved. But Zarah Sultana appears, who's his sort of co-party leader of the party, which is not called Your Party, it's called something else. It's my party, everyone's party, I don't know. Whatever it's called, I don't think it has a name yet, but anyway, Zarah Sultana has spent her afternoon correcting people, including her former colleague Mike Tapp, no stranger to this programme actually. Mike Tapp, the Labour MP, said it's called Your Party, and she says it's not called Your Party. Well, what's it called then, Zara? We can't get an answer out of them. But anyway, there is a new political party. Jeremy Corbyn and Zarah Sultana are the joint leaders. They've put out a mission statement about how the system is rigged. They've also talked about how we're all complicit in war crimes because of the Palestinian territories. And there's some polling as well today saying that 22% of respondents have a favourable view of Jeremy Corbyn, with 54% of people saying they have an unfavourable view of the MP for Islington North. I am part of the 54%. Let's speak to Martina Bett, who is political correspondent at The Sun. Martina, what is this party called?
I don't think anyone knows. I'm not sure they know. So it wasn't, as you mentioned, it wasn't exactly, a slick start, but, this new group seems to be serious in its intent.
It's their second launch, and they seem to have done, the first one was a tweet at 11 minutes past 8 on a Thursday evening, and Jeremy Corbyn hadn't been informed, and now they don't know the name of the party. So far it's all going really well.
Exactly, incredibly confusing. And when Zarah Sultana came out and she said that no, it's not called Your Party, people assumed that she would have an answer when people asked her, so what is the name? But no, they haven't got it. But as I said, this new group seems to be serious in its intent, at least, because it's planning to stand against Labour at the next local elections. It's already calling for higher taxes, mass wealth redistribution, and a ban on all arms sales to Israel. And, I think it's been run through the Corbyn's Peace and Justice Project with a raft of, very familiar hard left names behind it. And, what is this really about? Well, someone could say revenge. Corbyn was expelled from the Labour Party in 2020. Zarah Sultana lost a whip after rebelling against welfare policy. It's definitely a grudge match going on. And as you mentioned, what makes it a bit awkward for Starmer is this new stats coming out today, this new polling that says that Corbyn is now polling higher than Starmer on net approval. So should the Labour Party be worried? I mean, this start shows that will they be able to professionalise? Maybe not. But, it's definitely rattling Labour HQ for sure.
Certainly. Well, we'll find out what the name of the party is at some stage anyway. Starmer and Modi today. Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, signing a £6 billion trade deal. That's bound to be some new jobs coming our way, hopefully.
Absolutely. And I think Rachel Reeves is probably quite disappointed because that's quite a lot of money that's going to be added to the UK economy, as you just mentioned. But I don't think that they'll be able to ratify the trade deal in time for the OBR to be able to score it. Because I think Rachel Reeves would have been quite happy to have an extra £6 billion a year in a headroom.
And actually, the Tories are accusing her of covering up £10 billion of debt after loans to state-backed entities were allegedly buried in spending documents. How can you have a £10 billion debt and hide it?
Well, this is something that the Tories have been going on since the beginning of the Labour premiership. They basically say they've tweaked the rules on the fiscal rules, which means that they can, they can borrow money when it means to invest. She's basically facing accusation of bearing nearly 10 billion of extra debt. In the June spending review, using some, the Tories are calling it creative accounting to try to make the books look cleaner than they really are. But it's basically 9.6 billion in question, I think, was funneled through loans and equity stakes in state-backed projects like the Great British Energy and the British business banks. And, when the Tories are saying that while that might sound like investment, the government still has to borrow that money, which means that taxpayers are, on the hook for the interest of that money. But because Rachel Reeves has rewritten the fiscal rules, which means that, these loans now show up much more favourably on paper. They don't have to score them. But this is not new. This is not a new argument. This is what the Tories have been saying since Rachel Reeves came into office.
Yeah, certainly. There's a few other stories around today. Angela Rayner staffed air miles enough to go around the world 13 times. In fairness, she is the Deputy Prime Minister, and the person who was in that role at her department previously wasn't Deputy Prime Minister, was just the Housing Secretary. Tell us a bit about this story.
That's true. I mean, this Times article said the officials in our housing and local government department have racked up enough air miles in a year to fly almost 13 times around the world, and that business travel in the Deputy Prime Minister's department increased by 34% on the previous year, with a particular interest on international flights. The flight total is nearly 5 times that of Tory predecessors. Now, I think it's quite normal for officials having to travel for work. I think what people are going to have a problem with is that Angela Rayner, when she was in her previous role in opposition, she kept criticising the Tories for flying too much, for private jets, for all these things that then she ended up doing herself. So, when you claim to be whiter than white and then you end up doing the things that you criticize your opponents for, people are just not going to like the hypocrisy.
Just tell us a word as well about the junior doctors. West Streeting apparently offered them cheaper lunches in a last-ditch effort to avoid this 5-day strike, which now looks set to go ahead for the people with the 22% pay rise.
That's right. So the Sun obtained the Health Secretary's final offer to the BMA ahead of tomorrow's 5-day walkout, and includes quite a pretty desperate list of sweeteners. So you've got cheaper exam fees, lower equipment costs, and as you mentioned, even discounts on food and drink. It's just, I think the public are just wearing, the public's patience with these strikes are just wearing thin. The government, of course, says they can't move on pay, and now doctors are being offered everything but a salary hike, and they're still saying no. I just think that the BMA at some point is going to have to admit that they've lost the argument, because, cheaper sandwiches and cancelled cancer appointments just don't mix.
Yeah. Martina, thank you very much indeed. That is Martina Bett there, political correspondent at The Sun. Lots of people getting in touch. Margaret in Birmingham says freeloaders and scroungers crossed the channel yesterday. Still they keep coming. Starmer will not stop them because he wants them here. Fiona says, why is our government giving so much to these illegal migrants? Why do we pick them up in the channel? Why not pick them up in France? That way stops the need for the gangs. For that is all Keir Starmer is concerned about. A local resident visiting family in Epping. Peter, why do we only hear about the anti-migrant protesters being arrested and no mention of the mask-wearing political agitators being arrested? Yet another example of two-tier policing and reporting. That is Leo, who is a local resident visiting family in Epping. Leo, thank you for that. Happy to talk about that. Leslie says, why not immediately deport all those arriving in the coming weeks? As Greece is doing, it would be a deterrent and lessen the building backlog. Also, thank you to Alex in Solihull, who says, it's the Cadbury party because it is a fruit and nut. Well, apparently, calling Zarah Sultana and mocking her surname is racist, Alex. Of course it's racist, because she can't be racist, even though she's, has some things to say about Jewish people that I would argue are pretty racist. But the Observer previously ran a cartoon which they've taken down from their website as well and apologised. This was Zarah Sultana on the front of a box of raisins in the brand of Sun Made as part of a mock invitation to Jeremy Corbyn's party. She said of the caricature, brown facing a box of raisins and mocking my surname, exactly what you'd expect from a right-wing hack who's the daughter of an aristocrat and ex-Tory MP, in reference to the cartoonist Saffron Swire, who is the daughter of Sir Hugo Swire. Obviously she can't have her own opinions or anything, they just come, they're sort of innately brought down from her parents, because God forbid anybody should have different views from their parent who's a politician. But yeah, no, that's racist apparently, Alex. Zarah Sultana saying that the cartoon in The Guardian about Priti Patel having the bull ring through her nose, which is deeply offensive to Priti Patel and people of her religion. I don't remember Zarah Sultana talking about that. Maybe I'm mistaken. We're going to talk about Holly Passmore in a second. She's an activist for Jewish people and for Israel. She went on a trip to Israel organised by the Israeli embassy. That was a few weeks ago. Now she's been referred to Prevent. Yes, really. Police officers were on her doorstep. We're going to hear from her in a second. This nonsense will continue. Let me tell you, this is just the start. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Pete's been in touch about the story we're going to talk about a little bit later, about the International Court of Justice saying that in regard to climate, people could sue us and other countries because of climate emissions in future. Countries could sue other countries. Pete's been in touch and says, you just know where this ruling from the ICJ will be going. Starmer Hermer, he's a bit Harmer, but I think he means Lord Hermer, who's the Attorney General, the most dangerous man in government, and Lamy will rule over and sign us up to more debt which we can't afford. This will be the final straw. Unbelievable, says Pete. Thank you to Margaret in Birmingham, who says, why is Starmer not holding an emergency meeting? Yvette Cooper nowhere to be seen. Why is he not addressing this crisis? Starmer has to start putting the British people first and stop treating us with contempt. Greece have stopped the boats. Why can't Starmer do the same, says Margaret. And thank you to Tad Davison in Cambridge, who says, afternoon Peter, while I agree wholeheartedly with what Tony Smith said a little bit earlier in the programme, there's another angle to consider. These migrants would deport themselves if we took away the pull factor of the UK's generous handouts, stop their perks and benefits, and the exodus of migrants would be deafening. But Labour cannot do that. It's against their socialist ethos and why they're destined to fail, says Tad. Well, listen, thank you for that. Thanks also to Ant, who sent a lovely message in saying that he appreciates Talk and all who contribute to it. So thank you very much. Well, our next contributor has a fascinating story to tell, a very worrying story as well. This is Holly Passmore. Holly is an activist for Jewish people and for Israel. She was offered to go on a trip by the Israeli embassy. This was a few weeks ago. And do you know what? I was actually offered to go on the trip as well, Holly. I could have been on that trip with you, but my dad was coming over for a few days and it just didn't suit me. So I'll hopefully go on a further trip. But just tell us the story about, you went to Israel, you took part in the programme of events that was led on by the Israeli embassy. You came home. What happened then?
It was on the 4th of July. I got a knock on the door and they asked me whether I'd visited Israel, and I said yes. They said at first that they were safeguarding officers. I thought I didn't know what it was about, and I said...
That must be very worrying to hear safeguarding officers. You must, when you hear that, you think immediately you've done something wrong.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And they said it was about Israel, and I said, oh, well, my son didn't go. He stayed with my mum. Because they thought that I'd take my son to a war zone, because it just didn't make any sense for it to be anything else. And they said, no, the complaint was about you. Right. And they just said, so you went to Israel. Who did you go to Israel with? Do you plan to go back to Israel again? What's your connection to Israel? Why are you interested?
Why is that
in
any of their
Israel?
business? Why is any of that any of their business?
But it's really difficult when you have police come to your door.
Of course. Well, they ask you
I'm not-
questions, you'll answer them. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not confrontational. Also, you just kind of defer to the authority.
Sure.
So I answered it. I mean, the police were lovely. They weren't rude to me at all. They just came to the door, knocked on the door, and asked the questions that they'd obviously been told to ask.
So what had actually happened? Why had they come to your door?
Somebody had referred me to Prevent.
So this is the Prevent is the anti-terrorism program that says, right, there are people who are dodgy, who might are at risk of radicalisation, but all you had done was get on a flight, go to Israel and come home.
Well, yeah, that's what I said. I said, did they think that I've been kidnapped by the Jews? Or, what is a radical Jew? What is because for them to have taken the complaint seriously, they must believe somehow that going to Israel puts anybody at risk of radicalisation. But I don't know what a radical Zionist is or what they would do.
I mean, this is mad. So who do you think referred your...
No idea. It was anonymous. Apparently it was anonymous, and it was on the 13th of June. But it's not the fact that, I mean, you get malicious people, especially when you're on X.
Yes.
But it's the fact that they must have had a meeting to discuss the referral.
Yes.
And decided that somehow I fit some kind of profile of somebody that could turn into a potential Zionist terrorist.
I mean, I can think of a lot of countries in the Middle East you could go to, come back from, and people would say, right, you've been to Syria, you've been to, you've been to Gaza, for example, and you've come back. Maybe you might have been radicalised when you're there. I mean, it's unlikely, certainly in Gaza at the moment, but it's certainly because you can't get in. But in terms of being radicalised, going to Israel, which is an ally of ours, we sell them weapons. That's controversial, but we'll not get into that. We, even though I think we're probably of the same mind on that, Holly, they're an ally. It's also a very popular tourist destination in peacetime.
It's a wonderful country.
Well, I've been myself. I loved it. It was fascinating. The history is fascinating. I wanted to go again. I wanted to go on the trip that you were on, but then my dad came over.
Great. You missed the treat.
So you had a really good time?
It was fantastic. Yeah, we met with a lot of really interesting people. We met with some survivors. We went to Kfar Aza. There's a disability centre there where they kind of empower people with disabilities to, live by themselves and to get independence. It was just amazing. Mm-hmm. The time and effort that they put into it, because it's a small country, and they really do empower people to give back to that country. It was a phenomenal trip. I learned an awful lot.
It must have been very strange to come back and be told you were deemed to be at least worthy of an interview by these safeguarding officers. So how did it all end?
It ended. There was a post put on by David Collier online, and then Darren Grimes posted.
So David Collier, I should say, is a campaigning journalist. He busts a lot of myths that are put out by the hard left and people who are pro-Palestinian. He's a great man. And then it was picked up by a Reform UK councillor, Darren Grimes. Yeah,
because he's in my area.
Oh, okay.
And then I don't think the police liked that it was online about it. So they came out to speak to me, and the guy from Prevent came out as well. And they said, it's got nothing to do with Israel, which is strange because it can't have anything to do with anything else.
Otherwise, yeah, what else has it got to do with?
They're just turning up on people's doorsteps to ask if they're radicals. But if it had nothing to do with Israel...
It's got nothing to do with Israel. What's it got to do with?
Well, they only asked about Israel.
Yeah.
There was no other context of the conversation.
This is so weird. Do you know what? It's really sinister as well. It's strange, but it's also sinister that you can go to a democracy, you can go of your own volition, you weren't brainwashed, you weren't radicalised in any way, I'm sure you learned a lot, but you essentially, presumably, think the same now as you did when you left, just in a slightly different way because you've learned. But, I mean, it's not as if you were brought there by the government of another country, which is an ally as well. Have you spoken to the Israelis about it?
Oh yes, I've been joking with them. I said, well, if I'm being indoctrinated, it's you. You know, you're the extremists.
Wow.
Oh well, it's best to joke because it's preposterous. I mean, I have been very stressed about it. It is stressful, you know, to feel like you have the state on your doorstep because you've been doing advocacy for Israel. It is stressful, but I think
and it shows as well that these people can make these malicious complaints and not just be told by the police, hold on a second, where's your evidence for this? Maybe you should just go away. And what they'll say is they'll go back. It's the same with non-crime hate incidents as well. They'll say, right, we'll chalk that up. We've interviewed this person, and now, you know, there's nothing more to see here. And there's so many people who have been victims of burglary, victims of serious crime, when the police don't even come out.
Yeah, somebody shared a statistic with me the other day, and it said that 84% of sexual assaults in County Durham don't get dealt with, or it doesn't lead to prosecution. So. Yeah. Yet
the police are are saying this at the moment. My goodness. Well, listen, I know you're an advocate for Jewish people and for Israel itself, Holly. I just wonder what you think, because I mean, I am too, but I just wonder, it's becoming tricky at the moment. I wonder what you think about this. I'm interested in your perspective on this in regard to Gaza, because there is starvation in Gaza. There are problems with aid in Gaza. There are serious problems, obviously, in regard to people who need to be fed, and innocent children and people who aren't supporters of Hamas there. What would you say to people who say, actually, maybe Israel has gone too far? What would your thought be on that?
Well, I don't think it's only Israel that have a hand in feeding Gaza, for a start. No country is usually asked to feed an entire population of people who've attacked them. But on the other side of that, there are 950 lorries worth of UN aid that aren't being delivered, and GHF has said that they would deliver it, and apparently the UN have said that no. So the aid's just sat there. GHF are trying very hard.
This is the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the American and Israeli grouping together that's attempting to provide aid. Yeah.
We visited Kerem Shalom when we were there and saw the aid that they were delivering, and the guy that was running it, and he cares deeply about getting the aid into the hands of the people there and not to Hamas, and that should be the most important thing. But it just seems like there's a massive effort to delegitimize the work that they're doing at GHF. And I think that the politics really needs to be taken out of it. Nobody wants to see people starving in Gaza. And I think everybody really needs to be working together to feed the innocent civilians that are there and to avoid giving it to Hamas so they can not do this to Israel again and not keep punishing and hurting their own civilians as well, because Hamas attack their own people as well.
Holly, great to talk to you. Thank you. I hope this all goes away, and I hope you're able to do what you want to do and keep free speech. We're the home of free speech. We're the home of common sense, and we support your right to free speech. So thank you for speaking to us. That is Holly Passmore there, who's a mother who's referred to Prevent. She does some activism and advocacy for Jewish people and for Israel online as well. Lots of people getting in touch. Pat in Brent says, can you imagine what a better life the Brits would have with the £7 to £10 million every week spent on us instead of immigrants? Jez in Sussex says Corbyn's new party is likely to be called Free Palestine. Caroline says this is great news about the new party, because the more the Labour vote is split, the better for Reform UK. Mark says, could the new party be called It's My Party and I'll Cry If I Want To? Perhaps not, but at least it would have a catchy theme tune. Maybe if Rachel Reeves joined it. Thank you to Lorraine, who says Ben Julian Harrington, he is the Chief Constable of Essex Police, of course, demonstrated complete arrogance when he tried to gaslight the normal British public into believing he had acted in their best interest. This man heads the Essex Police and jokingly is the go-to expert for protest policing. He has paid a huge salary to ensure public safety, and yet under his command, police escorted members of the far left dressed in masks and balaclavas to confront harmless women and children exercising their right to peaceful protest. It was absolutely clear that a dangerous confrontation was inevitable. He totally failed in his remit, and to make matters worse, lied to the public by denying the police involvement in this. The only reason the police finally admitted their actions were simply because the evidence proved otherwise. Harrington's position is untenable. His force's actions have become further eroded in trust in our law and order service. If he had a moral compass, he would resign, but sadly he does not. Yvette Cooper, as the Home Secretary, is conspicuous by her absence and an abject failure, says Lorraine. A long message, but lots of good points from Lorraine. Plenty more good points coming from you. If you want to get your voice on the air, the number to call is 0344 499 1000. We'll take your calls next here on Talk.
If you want to know what's really wrong with this country, fundamentally the decision was taken beginning in the 1960s to abolish the idea of personal responsibility, to explain all crime as some kind of reaction to bad social conditions or abuse or whatever it might be, and to cease to enforce law as law is to cease to get rid of the old concept of punishment. The working maxim of the prison system in this country used to be the due punishment of responsible persons.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, some breaking news, and that is that The Sun is reporting that Hulk Hogan has died. The wrestler and supporter of Donald Trump has apparently died. We'll see if we can verify that and get plenty of more information. So, yeah, this is reports suggesting the WWE legend Hulk Hogan has died at the age of 71. Hogan was born Terry Jean Bollea and was reportedly found dead in his Clearwater, Florida home on Thursday morning. He was the star of many, not just, of course, the World Wrestling, but also a number of films as well, including Mackenzie's Island. Hulk Hogan has apparently died at the age of 71. He was a supporter of Donald Trump, certainly, and we will bring you more news on that when we have it. But The Sun's reporting it, lots of other outlets reporting it. The mainstream media doesn't seem to be reporting it just yet, but if The Sun's reporting it, I'm sure it's right, and that is that Hulk Hogan has died at the age of 71. Right then, let's hear a voice note from Peter on the small boats.
Hi Peter, Pete from Lincolnshire. I just wondered to myself, we've got probably on a good day, sort of 8 to 10 boats coming across. You know, that's probably 300, 400, 500 a day. What happens when that increases to, say, 150 boats a day that are coming across, and maybe that's then bringing in 10,000 migrants a week? What are we going to be doing then? And also, if the smugglers have got a working model that is proving that they can get in on boats, why aren't they sending 150 boats across a day, or even 75 boats across a day? So it makes me wonder, is this being organised deliberately so that it's got sufficient capacity for our rescue boats to go and get them? Because if it was, say, 10,000 a week, I'm sure our rescue boats, the Coast Guard and that, they wouldn't have the capacity to bring them in. So, great show. Cheers.
Thanks very much, Peter. Yeah, it's a fair point, actually. I suppose it is capacity. It's capacity, certainly, of the Coast Guard, and also the demand as well. Maybe the level of demand isn't there, and, for those gangs, maybe they're smashed enough to know that they don't have the capacity for 150 boats a day. So we'll see what happens there. We'll see how things go in that regard, certainly. Khaled is in Leicester and wants to talk about the Middle East. Khaled, you're very welcome to the programme.
For a few days. And your stomach sounds.
Hello? Khaled?
Hello?
Khaled?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Hi.
You're on the air. What would you like to say?
Sorry, just playing with my grandchildren. Sorry.
Okay. What would you like to say, Khaled?
Yeah, I'm saying, look, as far as Israel's current and Gaza's current situation is concerned, I think the media have a responsibility to play, in the sense that, look, every day we're seeing horrific scenes. The most horrific scenes. I got grandchildren. I can't, just them being upset just for a few seconds, and I feel agitated.
Yeah.
Right? So you cannot facilitate what Israel is doing, and you cannot support this. It has got to a stage, Peter, whereby, you have to stand up for what is right. Don't just listen to Israel's narratives and propaganda. In fact, in the Knesset, they've actually given the go-ahead to take over Gaza and the West Bank. Right? They've all agreed.
But what they're trying to do at the moment, the immediate problem, Khaled, as I think we can agree, I know we don't agree on much, but what I think we can agree at the moment is that these children need to be fed. These innocent people need to be fed. They need to have clean water. They need to have sanitation. They need to have healthcare, and they need to be fed. And there appears to me to be a row between Israel and America in the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and UNRWA, the UN agency, and it seems to be a bureaucratic row about the distribution of aid and the fact that when GHF try to give aid to people, Hamas attack them.
But see, Peter, you've got to understand. First of all, GHF is not. You call it GFS, but it's actually GTF, the Gaza Terrorist Foundation.
It's not a terrorist organisation. It's not a terrorist foundation. It's not.
When they're killing people who's starving and
they're not killing people.
What do you mean they're not killing people?
They're not killing people.
Which world are you living in, Peter?
I'm living in a world. Living in a world where they're trying to distribute aid. There have been people who've been killed there. Definitely, there's no doubt about that. There have been things that have gone wrong. There have been Israeli soldiers who haven't done the right thing. I'm not saying they have done the right thing, but the foundation itself is trying to give aid out. That's what it's trying to do.
There were over 400 sites giving aid out when UNRWA were distributing aid. There's only four. There's four. In fact, they're cutting down from 4 to about 3 or 2 even now.
So then, I suppose the question is, if Israel are controlling most of Gaza and they're saying we are going to distribute the aid, why will the UN not give them their aid to distribute? That's my question.
Israel, listen, Israel. You got to understand. You know what planned is, Peter. This is not conspiracy. This is the plan they are carrying out. They want to take parts of Syria, which they're doing. They're taking parts of Iraq, which they've done. They're bombing Yemen continuously.
The Houthis are bombing them as well, and they're attempting to defeat the Houthis because they're Iranian proxies. My point is, what do you think aside from all that, Khaled, what do you think the best option to get hungry mouths fed in Gaza is?
Obviously, they need immediate food. Get rid of Israel's control over the whole area. You cannot let Israel dictate what they want to do.
Well, they can, and they're doing that. And you may not want it to happen, but that is what is happening. Israel are waging a war against Hamas. Part of that is that people are going hungry. I don't want them to go hungry. I want people to have food and sanitation and healthcare and water and everything they need. I want Hamas to be free. I want Gaza to be free of Hamas.
The point is, Peter, this Hamas was a creation. This was created after decades of brutality, Peter. It's very straightforward. Hamas wasn't even there when this bombing and this killing has been taking place on a continuous basis in 1948. So you can't just blame everything on Hamas. You can't just put everything on Hamas and then do whatever you want. Kill all the children.
Okay, so the National Security Advisor to Joseph Biden was a man whose name temporarily escapes me, but he said that, I've met him, what's his name? Jake Sullivan, I've met Jake Sullivan, who said that the Middle East was uncharacteristically peaceful for about a month before the 7th of October attacks. So the situation in Gaza has been created to some degree by Hamas.
Listen, Peter. There was no such thing as peace before 7th of October. There was hundreds of Palestinians who were killed in Gaza and in the West Bank. There's no Hamas in the West Bank. They've been taken continuously. There's over 15,000 hostages that have been taken.
Khaled, they're not hostages; they're prisoners. Khaled, can you tell me one thing Israel's done right ever?
One thing Israel has done right. That's a very hard question, that one. I can't think of anything, right, to tell the truth, because they've persecuted and brutalized the Palestinian population.
Can you not see, Khaled, that you're so... You have a view, a strong view, and that's fine, and you're entitled to your view, but can you not see that you have such a strong view that when the facts don't back up your view, you may be unwilling to see those facts? I've asked you for one good thing that Israel has ever done since 1948, and you can't think of a single thing.
Are you telling me that the Yorkshire Ripper, when he massacred all these ladies and he killed them, are you going to start looking for his good points?
That's not the same argument at all. That's not the same argument at all. You're saying that Israel has never done something right, essentially. You can't think of a single thing since 1948 that Israel's done right, ever. Not one.
I can't think of anything apart from brutalising the Palestinian population.
Well, I don't think that's what they've done. And if you can think of something, feel free to give me a ring back. That's Khaled in Leicester there. Paul is in Essex. Paul, we have such a short time. Maybe you could give me your thoughts on migration before we go to the news.
I'd like to give you some thoughts on Khaled, but we'll pass that one.
So let's stick to migration, perhaps.
The whole issue, we can all, as Britons, help ourselves. I mean, residents of Britain who are paying their taxes. Let's, for the month of August, say we stop using barbers who turn over the staff regularly and insist on cash. We stop using Uber and paying them cash. We don't get any takeaways delivered by Deliveroo or Just Eat, and where people can't speak English. We stop using Amazon if the drivers can't speak English. We don't go to car washes where the staff turn over on a regular basis. And we have a whole month off, a whole month of August off, feeding these people, because that's what we are doing. If you are listening to this programme and you're spending money in all of those, you're feeding the problem.
The problem is that somewhere like Uber, for example, Uber Eats, for example, which I've used a few times, Paul, there are totally legitimate people who deliver those meals. It's not all...
There are some.
Yeah.
Forgive me. There are some legitimate people in everything I've just said.
Sure.
There are masses that are not. And until we act in a way that is... It's a bit extreme, but that's the only way.
And I wonder how many people would do it as well. But it's an interesting idea, Paul. Thank you very much. We've got to go to the news. After the news, we're going to talk more about the asylum situation. Going to take more of your calls as well. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this evening. Lots to talk about, including the Essex police chief rejecting calls to resign over his handling of the Epping Asylum Hotel protests. We're also about the pro-migration protest group escorted by police. Guess who it's funded by? Trade unions. Guess who's involved? Diane Abbott. This stuff is too predictable. Also, the unsolved crime epidemic continues. Shoplifting cases soaring by 20%. And are the police ready for a summer of unrest? I hope it doesn't happen, but it might. Lots to discuss in all of that. We'll also take your calls, 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about the London Borough offering half-price Lime bike rides, these e-bikes, to asylum seekers, a host of other benefits, things like half-price fireworks displays. Some of them may well be staying in another part of London as a luxury £425 a night hotel has been paid for by you, the taxpayer. This is for asylum seekers in an insult to law-abiding Brits. We'll talk as well about how Britain could be sued over climate change as well, and take a look inside the Sun tomorrow with their Deputy Head of News a little bit later on. Lots to discuss. Stay with us here on Talk and get your voice on the air. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the words Talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please, to the same number as the next two things I'm going to say, the number for calls and also the number for WhatsApp text messages. You know it by now, 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and Kevin O'Sullivan at 7 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. We've also got some developing news on reports, including in the Sun, suggesting that the WWE legend Hulk Hogan has died at the age of 71. He was born Terry Jean Bollea and was reportedly found dead in his Clearwater, Florida home this morning. In America, obviously, paramedics and police patrol were reportedly parked outside his home this morning. In Florida, Hogan was wheeled out of his home on a stretcher and into an ambulance, according to the website TMZ, or TMZ as I suppose it would be called here. It was also reported a few days ago that the wrestling legend couldn't speak and was being monitored at home by medical staff after having a bad reaction to surgery. The wrestling icon's cause of death has not been disclosed, and of course we will bring you more on that. At the MAGA rally, of course, it was an iconic scene when he tore off his singlet. He did this thing where he tore off his singlet, and as you can see on the screen right now, this was him tearing off his singlet with a big M on it, MAGA, Make America Great Again, and he was dancing to YMCA by the Village People as well. He was a big Trump supporter, and of course Hulk Hogan, who has died today at the age of 71, also starred in a number of films, as well as Mackenzie's Island, which I was told at one stage when I was watching it that we were really scraping the barrel because it had appalling action and no plot to speak of, apparently, the Mackenzie's Island. But Hulk Hogan starred in that film anyway. He was in a number of other films as well, and that is Hulk Hogan, who has died at the age of 71. Right, Len, let's talk to Chris Phillips. Chris is the a former Detective Chief Inspector at the Metropolitan Police. He's the former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. Chris, you're very welcome to the programme. There's a load to discuss this evening, including the head of Essex Police, who is refusing to resign. Do you think he should, after these protests and the fact that these counter-protesters appear to have been escorted to the protest?
No, I don't think he should resign at all. I think it's quite standard practice, actually. Every weekend during the football season, police have to escort one group or another to prevent a breach of the peace. And don't forget, police officers are peace officers. They're there to prevent a breach of the peace, and I'm sure that's what they were doing. That doesn't mean to say it doesn't look good. That doesn't mean to say that if you are one side or the other, then, you know, police are always seen to be favouring the other, it seems. But I think it's standard practice in these kind of instances, and just unfortunate that it's been picked up like this.
But it's interesting in terms of the allegations that they were escorted to the protest itself. Is that something that's a responsible course of action by police? Because Nigel Farage is essentially accusing this guy of lying.
Yeah, well, the trouble is, the law in this country says that you have a right to peaceful protest. It's as simple as that. And the police have to, by law, make sure that people, if they choose to protest without causing violence, they're to be given every chance to do that. Now, I don't know the ins and outs of exactly what happened, but it is right that they would try to prevent the breach of the peace. And if that means escorting one group or the other, then they had to do that. So I think this is a bit of a overreaction, to be honest. I know Nigel very well, and I think this is an overreaction to what is normal police procedure.
There was some violence on both sides, arguably as a result of this. I want to come back to you on that in a second, but I just want to look at this clip just for a minute now about a reporter asking the Chief Constable of Essex Police about this and whether things were one-sided. Let's just have a look at this clip, and then I promise I'll get your reaction, Chris.
Do you accept that your officers have given a higher level of protection to one side of the demonstration? And do you also accept that in the accusation being made today that those officers' actions
caused some of the violence?
No, I don't accept that. The only protection that officers are doing is to those lawful and law-abiding people, whether they're in that accommodation, whether they're the people of Epping, or whether they are people who are standing there, as I've seen and you've seen the footage, standing there, you know, with placards and banners wishing to make a very important and legitimate view, whichever your views about it. Where officers have intervened, that has because there has been disorder, there has been threats, or there has been the fear and concerns of those threats. And as I said at the beginning, that is exactly what policing will do, and we will step forward to do that. We are not being partial in any way, shape or form. If you're here to protest peacefully and lawfully, we will allow you. It's not us giving permission, if you are exercising your legitimate rights. Where you break the law, that is where we'll intervene.
Would it not make more sense, Chris, to allow those people to protest but not beside one another, to keep them separate? I don't have anything near your level of experience or expertise, but what I've done as a reporter is covered places where there are peaceful protests that sometimes aren't so peaceful by the end of the evening in Northern Ireland on many, many occasions. And what generally happens is that one side is kept by the police on one side of the street or the interface or wherever it is, and the counter-protesters are kept on another side, both exercising their right to peaceful protest, but not in the same place.
Yeah, I think this was probably decisions made on the hoof by the officers that were there at the time, and difficult decisions they've got. They know that they've got to allow people to protest peacefully. I don't think Essex actually, as a constabulary, deals with a great number of these things.
But this guy's meant to be an expert. This chief constable is meant to be an expert in all of this. He's meant to be an expert in public order.
Actually there. I doubt he was there, Peter. I think probably his officers made some decisions.
Would there not have been a gold command set up? Would there not have been? They know this protest is either happening or is about to happen. There are counter-protests coming in. They're facilitating that. Surely some sort of gold command is set up where they say, right, every decision that is made here, we're going to run it by whoever the senior assistant chief constable or deputy chief constable or whoever the ranking officer is back at base. Surely that would happen.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. I don't know how much pre-information they had about these people turning up, but you know, I go back to the fact that, you know, police sometimes make mistakes, so there's no doubt about that. Sometimes in the cold light of day, what they did probably they wouldn't do in another circumstance. But I think they're trying to be as even-handed as they can. I'm sure of that. And you know, people have a right to protest. Now, you know, there are difficulties with this kind of stuff. Police are always in the middle of these situations. And as I said previously, it's not unusual to escort one group rather than another. Every weekend, football fans from opposing teams are escorted to the grounds through the local vicinity to protect them, to prevent the bigger crowd from being able to get to them. So this is not abnormal behaviour.
Okay, Chris, I just want to ask you about what Tiff Lynch, who's the head of the Police Federation, essentially the police officers' union in all but name really, says that officers are being pulled in every direction. Commanders are forced to choose between keeping the peace at home or plugging national gaps. I do not want there to be a repeat of the scenes in Epping at any stage over the summer, but we know that things are tense. We know that there are a lot of people who feel the way people in Epping feel, especially when migrant hotels are open. We know there will be counter-protesters. We know that this isn't going to be the last protest this summer. So are the police ready if things do get out of control, do you think?
Well, the police have always got backup and reinforcements ready. They've got the territorial support group in London and similar across the country. But listen, rioting and disorder is a summer sport. There's no doubt about that. July and August, September are always the months. If it's going to happen, that's when it's going to happen. I think police need to be ready, and that they will now be considering this. And I think, you know, across the country, people like me and everyone else, huge numbers of people, are so frustrated about what the government's doing with these hotels that people's anger will boil over. And I think if we see a spate of serious incidents relating to these to people that are in these hotels, and I think it's quite a big possibility that things are going to go bad.
I just want to read out a couple of messages that we've received from our viewers and listeners, and maybe you could give me your thoughts on that, Chris. Peter, no issues if protesters are escorted, that is policy, but if they are given a lift, that is unfair. Alison in Billericay says, a very important and legitimate view. There were thugs in masks clearly there to cause trouble. Made on the hoof, they obviously knew they were coming and they escorted them. This is gaslighting nonsense. And Kerry, who says, at the very very least, the police should use their powers, legitimate powers, to make the counter-protesters take off their masks. What do you make of those comments, Chris?
Yeah, and I agree with them, actually. I think you do have to make decisions on the ground very quickly when things come before you. There's no doubt about that. I've been a public order commander. I've had to make decisions, and sometimes you look back at them and you think, my goodness, if I had that chance again, I'd do something different. I don't think that they should have been escorted in vehicles. I think that would be wrong. But of course, on the other hand, if you've got a group of people that you think are going to get assaulted, then maybe sometimes you take the easier way out and get rid of them.
But if you're bringing them closer to the people who you think might assault them, is that the best course of action?
No, it's not sensible, and I think, as I say, lessons will be learnt from this. But we mustn't keep beating up the police just because we've got this very difficult situation at this particular hotel. As I said, there are huge numbers of people across the country who are immensely frustrated by what's going on in these hotels, and I'm one of them. The government needs to sort that out, and of course, until that happens, the police are piggy in the middle, literally trying to deal with a very difficult situation. We should be supporting them for doing that.
We'll talk more about Asylum in a second, actually, with our next guest. But just before you go, I want to ask you about the unsolved crime epidemic. Shoplifting cases soaring by 20%. Over 500,000 shoplifting offences recorded in England and Wales, as opposed to 444,000 in the previous year. 56% of them going unsolved. Just 20% of them resulting in a suspect being charged or summoned. What on earth is going on here?
Well, yeah. Absolutely. I would say this. Shoplifting has never been a crime that's had a very good solve or even reporting rate. I think me and others have been telling shops to actually report more of this crime, because until they do that, then the police can't put the resources in. But we are at a situation
But they report it and then it's not solved. People are...
Yeah, well... They wouldn't think, you won't put your resources in if you don't have a crime that's actually been reported in the first place.
Yeah,
and
but
I think
what we do know is that
to report than they have been.
But these are the ones that are being reported, 530,000 of them, and only 20% are actually resulting in a suspect being charged or summoned. I mean, that is not a ringing endorsement of the justice system.
Oh no, the justice system is absolutely shot, Peter. I've been saying this for years. If you take away all these police officers, as the Conservatives did a few years ago, and take away the finances to allow police officers to do their job, give the police huge amounts of extra work to do as well, and then make a criminal justice system which makes a mockery of justice being done in the first place. So this is a root and branch issue, right from policing right through to the courts and the prisons. And until they solve that, then we are not going to be able to deal with the crime that we're facing, and people are, laughing in the face of justice, which is, to me, absolutely abhorrent.
Chris, thanks for your thoughts there. That's Chris Phillips, the former Detective Chief Inspector in the Metropolitan Police and former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. Lots to tell you about what our viewers and listeners are saying. Leo says, I'm afraid what is happening in Epping and certain parts of central London epitomises what a ghastly period our country is going through at the moment under this Labour government. I do feel sorry for the younger generation and our children. What have they got to look forward to? Paul in Hitchin says, regarding the possibility that the UK could be sued for climate change, our idiot Foreign Secretary and Prime Minister Starmer, they love giving our money away. I hope the likes of Chad do. If the UK loses, we can tell the UN lawyers to stick it where the sun doesn't shine. What are they going to do about it? Take the UK by force, give me strength, says Paul in Hitchin. Well, if we're telling them to stick it where the sun doesn't shine, surely that would reduce climate change, Paul. So maybe that's some sort of sensible option. Maybe we'd be sued less if they stuck it where the sun didn't shine. Lots to discuss. Thank you to Chris in Northumberland, who says, I'm going to have to start turning off when Khaled calls in. I can't listen to him anymore, says Chris. Alison in Billericay says, if Israel is so terrible, how come the population of Gaza has grown? A very good point, Alison, and that absolutely goes into this nonsense, absolute nonsense of calling it a genocide. It is factually not a genocide, because I mean, there's so many different qualifications for what a genocide actually is. I've just come back from Amsterdam. I was there for a couple of days on holiday visiting a friend over from America, and we're in a situation where I went to the Anne Frank house. I heard about a genocide that she was part of. I bought a couple of copies of her diary as well, one for a friend. and certainly what happened in the Holocaust was undoubtedly a genocide. What is happening in Sudan is a genocide. What's happening in Nigeria is a genocide. Do you see people shouting and waving and screaming and going on protest marches in London about that? No. What's happening in Gaza is dreadful. It's really awful. I want it to stop. I want those children to be fed. I want people to live a free life, preferably in a democracy, and certainly free of Hamas. What so many people, and what I would argue people like Khaled, don't understand, or at least it's not that they don't understand, they just don't accept that Hamas caused this. Israel would not be in Gaza were it not for Hamas. And I know that Mike in Lincoln is right. He's been in touch and says, please call on your caller, Khaled, to tell Hamas to go and free the hostages. Then all this about aid and the Guffey spouts would go away. Tez in Wales says, hasn't Gaza got 2 other borders? Are they not getting aid in through there? Just wondering. Tez, you're right. They certainly have a border with Egypt, and very, very few people talk about the Egyptians. The Egyptians certainly don't want refugees from Gaza, and they are scrutinised far less than the Israelis. Wonder why? We'll talk much more about migration in just a second. Stay with us.
Of course, what happened in 1997 or thereabouts was Tony Blair said education, education, education. And some smart and ambitious police officers thought, we'll have a bit of this. And off they went to university to get their degrees. And they came back with their heads brainwashed with pseudo-intellectual Marxist claptrap. And so the police service we have today is unrecognisable from the policing of my era.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A couple of people on Twitter quite rightly taking issue with what Chris Phillips said there in regard to the football fan. Another Chris says, Chris Phillips uses the football fan analogy. Football fans are kept apart, not escorted to and from a place of confrontation. Essex police were wrong and Chris is wrong, says this Chris. And another person says the football analogy is false. The police don't escort 2 rival football groups to face each other. They keep them apart. In fairness, I think what Chris Phillips was saying there was that police are used to escorting rival groups of people. And he did say mistakes were made and lessons should be learned from that situation. Certainly those people should never have been together. And the Chief Constable of Essex Police neglects or at least denies, I should say, denies that what his actions or the actions of his officers actually meant that there was greater confrontation. Well, I think they did facilitate that from what I can see, and that was not the right decision. Those protesters should have been kept apart. Both groups are, I mean, completely, you know, we live in a free society. We're the home of free speech. We know people have free speech even if we disagree with them. And I think there are a lot of people who I certainly would never be on a pro-Palestinian protest, for example, but the people have the right to do that. Even though I don't think London should be kept to a standstill every 2 weeks. But what I'm saying is that people do have a right to protest, they have a right to have their voice heard, but they shouldn't be brought together. And certainly if you're wearing a ski mask, if you're wearing a balaclava, you should not be facilitated by anybody. You should be arrested because you're clearly up to no good. Craig in Birmingham says, would the police escort 50 Glasgow Rangers fans to stand 10 metres near 200 Celtic fans? No, of course they wouldn't. Mr Cardwell says, another person, I was always a police supporter. Now my family has made it clear we will never help or support them ever again because they don't care about us, the people. Shame on them all. Terry in Slough says, this clown of a Prime Minister has got a good way of deterring asylum seekers and illegal immigrants. We will put them up in first-class hotels. That will really put them off coming, won't it? I don't think this Labour government is absolutely clueless, says Terry in Slough. John's been in touch with a voice note as well.
I used to live in Turkey and I abided by the rules there. When I had to move back to look after elderly parents, it was during COVID. I had to pay nearly £3,000 for myself and my husband to come back into our own country. And yet these migrants are coming in every single day. They're getting everything paid for. My elderly parents can't get any help because unfortunately my dad's worked all his life. Tell me, how fair is this government? Really, we need to get them out. They are absolutely useless.
Yes, John, I think your frustration is there for all to hear, and certainly a number of people feeling exactly the same way as you. Henry Bolton is with us now. He's an international border control expert and the SDP's spokesman for Foreign Affairs, Defence and Security. Henry, there's so many asylum stories around at the moment, but I think the number one thing that is annoying people, including John, I think, is the luxury £425 a night hotels. I mean, there are so few people. I wouldn't pay £425 a night for a hotel. I couldn't afford that. I couldn't afford to stay for maybe one night, but I wouldn't voluntarily spend that amount of money. I think the most I've ever spent in a hotel is maybe £200 and usually it's more like 50 or 100 if I ever do, which is rare, stay in a hotel. We've just been in Amsterdam, for example, stayed with a friend there to keep costs down because we're in a cost of living crisis, yet we have people who've contributed absolutely nothing to this country who are staying in £425 a night hotels paid for by the taxpayer.
Peter, just one thing. I understand that the amount of money that's being paid per person in this hotel is actually nearer £80–85. So I don't know where the 400 figure came from. Maybe that's something that's.
I think it can cost that amount. I think this is a 4-star hotel, and I think that probably the maximum amount, like if you were to arrive on the day that it was. But the fact is that this is a very good hotel. It's got a pool, it's got a games room, it's got all sorts of facilities. That there are many people. There's a chandelier in it, 4-poster bed. I mean, there are a lot of people just wouldn't have access to that.
Yeah, look, I'm not in any way.
No, of course.
What's going on here? Because I think it's absolutely appalling governance and management of this situation. Absolutely scandalous. But at the same time, I'm trying to get the facts right. And the problem here is that the government simply hasn't. I mean, we've said it time and time again, and the government has simply not listened and is not responding. There is no effective plan to deal with these people. Now, I'll tell you where I think all this comes from, Peter. I think we've got a government led by a Prime Minister who has defined himself not only by the fact that he's the son of a toolmaker and his mother worked for the NHS, but by the fact that he is former Director of Public Prosecutions. He is a lawyer, and he's a particularly, I think, sort of canalised lawyer. And I think he takes great offence at the criminality that's going on because the former DPP in him sort of responds to that. But I don't think he's got the slightest bit of concern about this country being exploited by economic migrants and illegal immigrants. I don't think that's on his radar. You see, and I think when he hears people complaining about this sort of thing, I think he thinks that we're a bunch of troublemakers.
I genuinely think he does not get it.
He doesn't get it. We saw the other day, for example, at the liaison committee, the sort of super committee of MPs, that he was asked about housing, and he said, "Oh, there's loads of housing." I mean, there isn't. Yeah. He's not connected with real people and the proper picture of this country that we recognise on this station, and so many people like him don't.
Indeed, and I spoke not so long ago to a Labour Party advisor. And I said, look, you know, you sit in your, I know where that person lives, I'm not going to say, but, you know, it's a fairly sort of, it's a very affluent, multicultural, crime-free area. And I said, come down to East Kent, go around the pubs and the cafes in East Kent and listen to people. Don't even ask them questions, just listen to the conversation in the room. And you will hear that it's all about this problem that we're talking about now. It's about the illegal immigrants, the asylum seekers, the fact that we're being effectively culturally displaced by the number of immigrants coming into this country. And he said, I'm not going to do that. Why would I do that? You'll just fill these places with your own people. And they're in denial, these people. And that's our biggest problem. But, of course, people are furious, and rightly so. The illegal immigrants, and I class the asylum seekers, almost every single one of them, as illegal because they are economic migrants.
Well, they've arrived here illegally. They are by definition illegal migrants.
And as far as I'm concerned, the only way to deter these people is to detain them behind wire in a secure premises, every single one, without exception, until we can remove them, or they ask to go back to wherever they came.
But what is actually happening, I mean, I agree with that. And what is actually happening, Henry, is that Wandsworth Borough Council is giving them 50% off e-bikes.
Correct.
They're giving them half-price annual fishing permits. They're saying that if you want to apply for a street party closure, you can have 50% off. You can have half-price tickets to Battersea Park fireworks, half-price tickets to Wandsworth Punto, half-price soft play and adventure play sessions in Wandsworth leisure centres. If I'm someone who is, you know, hard-working parent and I live in Wandsworth, which is a reasonably well-off area of London. There are good bits and bad bits of that part of London. And you're thinking, hold on a second, I'm paying full rate for my kid to go to the soft play area or for, you know, golf in the park or the fireworks or the pantomime or whatever. But my council is giving a card which gives you half price to those to people who haven't paid any council tax and have arrived in this country illegally. I mean, that is so straightforwardly an issue of fairness, and it's not. There can be no justification for that.
None at all in my books, Peter. But look, forgive me for looking at my phone here because I pulled this up because there's so many.
That's all right. Go for it.
There's an organisation called Cities of Sanctuary, and if you Google it, it's got on there a list of all the local authorities in the country who have joined Cities of Sanctuary. And now these are cities, these are towns, these are local authorities that are opening their doors to, welcoming and giving additional benefits of the sort to asylum seekers. You know, in London, just to cover a few, Brent Borough, Elmbridge, Epsom, Lewisham, Royal Greenwich.
And they wonder why what's happening in Epsom is happening in Epsom. The Labour Council leader, Councillor Simon Hogg, said this is about opening up this is in Wandsworth, opening up affordable, sustainable travel that helps our residents to access work and entertainment opportunities across the borough. We're proud that Lyme, Forres and Voy have agreed to join Access for All and operate respectfully and safely. We are making sure that no one is priced out of healthy and sustainable travel. Well, I mean, there are people who are priced out of healthy and sustainable travel because they won't be able to afford the Lime bikes that asylum seekers can get half price.
Correct. And look, you know, I can't get an NHS doctor around here. Most people can't. These people are getting free dental care. You've got that across the country. These boats will not stop coming until we address the fact that the United Kingdom is a highly attractive place for all these people to come to.
Yeah.
And we have got local councillors, we've got activists, we've got national politicians who are all actively, proactively trying to make this place as welcoming as possible, as attractive as possible. And the effect of that is that local people are being priced out of housing. There is no housing in some places. They are seeing, they see, as you say, this unfairness, and there is growing talk of unrest. Now, I can't believe that I'm hearing that, but from...
Well, there's a planned demonstration outside the Bell Hotel in Epping tonight as well. Now, that may well be totally peaceful. Let's hope it is. But we know that these, at least this protest anyway, outside the Bell Hotel is planned, Henry. People are angry. People are very, very worried about their communities.
And the Prime Minister himself, it's reported, has even said to the Cabinet last week, look, we have to repair the fabric of society, otherwise we might face immigration-related riots. The man's absolutely correct. But
he's just a year out of date. He should have known that a year ago.
And he doesn't understand why the fabric of society has been torn.
Yeah.
He doesn't understand that he's still tearing it.
Obviously, it's nothing to do with him. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. It's not us. And that's where we get this. He's transferring all of the blame onto ordinary people who have every right to express their concern about lack of housing, about the public safety aspect of this, the unfairness of it, and the fact that the British taxpayer is paying for all this, either through council tax or whatever. So the man doesn't get it. The government doesn't get it. And we have now got a government that's got such a massive majority that I honestly don't know democratically, because they are simply not listening. And in fact, because the majority they've got, they almost don't have to listen.
Okay.
How do we address this? It is terrifying. I mean, it's and add to that, Peter, we've been very lucky, and I don't want to jinx things, but we've been very lucky that we've not had any major terrorist attacks as a result of this. I know from my own work, directing intelligence operations some years ago against people smuggling networks to the European Union and the United Kingdom specifically, that extremist organisations and terrorist organisations do use these routes to infiltrate their people, their extremists, their terrorists into countries.
Oh, absolutely. And there's so much more to talk about on that issue specifically. Unfortunately, time has beaten us, but Henry, thank you. Henry Bolton, who's the International Border Control Expert and STP spokesman for Foreign Affairs, Defence and Security. Ghislaine Maxwell is apparently meeting the US Department of Justice at the moment. That's NBC is reporting that. We'll talk about Jeffrey Epstein, Donald Trump, and what's going on with the unsealing of those documents a little bit later on. Another story from America is Hulk Hogan has died. That has been confirmed by WWE. We're going to get a little bit of analysis of Hulk Hogan's career. I know there are quite a few wrestling fans on this who watch and listen to this station. We'll get a little bit of analysis of that next, and we'll get some of your calls as well. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Ed Miliband has been talking about our bills. We're talking as well about the International Court of Justice possibly allowing Britain to be sued on matters of climate change. We'll get all the latest on that from Alan Miller in just a second. I just want to play what Ed Miliband has been saying about energy bills.
Is that £300 off people's energy bills still a firm commitment from this government?
Look, we said we would cut people's bills by up to £300, and that remains a commitment. It was based on independent modelling. The key thing is that what we need to do is move to a system that can cut bills for good. And the way to do that is with the lower wholesale prices that renewable energy will bring.
Well, so far so confusing. That is the Energy and Net Zero Secretary Ed Miliband saying that the commitment is still to cut people's bills by up to £300, yet he's unveiled plans now to pay eye-watering prices to offshore wind farms, offering international developers up to £116 per megawatt hour for the power they generate from the farms, far above the wholesale price of power, which last year averaged around £72. The extra money risks being added to power bills via levy, inflating costs for households, industry and businesses. So that was him talking on the 21st of July, a few days ago. We will get analysis now from Alan Miller, who's the co-founder of the Together Declaration. Tell us your thoughts about these wind power price increases hitting energy bills, Alan.
Well, Peter, it's remarkable to see what I'm now calling mad Ed Miliband with his zealous approach to net zero, who on the one hand we were promised reduction in prices, but it's blatantly clear to anyone who's an expert in the industry and for all of us now that these renewables are not going to be the solution to our energy requirements. They're making us much more likely to have power cuts. They're going to impoverish us. On top of the cost of inflation, they're pushing up prices. He's now creating a situation where we are all going to have to pay much more for our energy prices, and he's doubling down with a strange Orwellian type of speak to say that if we do this, at some point it will get reduced. What we need, Peter, is proper infrastructure, nuclear investment, and what we're seeing with Ed Miliband is this kind of obsession, this ideology that every time reality says this is not viable, he then goes even further, putting all of our economy and our livelihoods, particularly working people in Britain and middle class people's energy situation at peril. It's irresponsible and it's dangerous. And that's why we've got a campaign that says no to net zero, because what we need to have is robust development. We need to have a situation where our energy is independent in Britain and that we can develop infrastructure and wealth, and so do the rest of the nations in the world as it happens, and many of them are continuing to do it without some of these preposterous moves.
Tell us as well about this International Court of Justice opinion saying a failure by countries to meet their climate obligations could, in specific cases, allow other states affected by climate change to sue them. What on earth is going on here, and do we have to accede to the ICJ? I would argue not.
Well, no, but there's a no and there's a but with this, Peter. Article 2 of the UN's convention says that the rights of nation states to have autonomy and self-determination. So what's happened is you've got a student moment that some young law students put an idea together that then lobbied the ICJ, and the United Nations has become a lobbying organisation for very partisan views now, particularly around the idea that we're facing environmental destruction and everyone must act now. The science is done, the debate is done, and now they need to push this. Now the ICJ, whilst this is a recommendation, it says that it's a wrongful act and they should have reparations potentially. Well, it opens the door for the idea of reparations. The thing is, whilst it can't legally bind us to it, what we've seen already, haven't we, with Lord Herma and the Chagos Islands and an ICJ recommendation.
Well, he'll just do whatever the international courts tell him to do. And we've had Richard Tice, for example, the deputy leader of Reform UK, saying Herma had demonstrated he does not bat for Britain. Dame Priti Patel, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, saying the International Court of Justice has lost its core purpose and is now joining political campaigns and bandwagons based upon ideological obsessions on issues such as reparations and destroying the sovereign rights of national governments. The Labour government is equally ideologically obsessed with this nonsense. Activist-led court rulings like this should never be treated as binding.
Well, I think that sort of sums up much of it. I think we've got a situation where a tone is set with the United Nations and the ICJ, and then some who are lobbying for particular views and very partisan then try and make those things happen in nation states. And we must challenge that and refute it. It's the other reason, I mean, look, the whole idea of the United Nations and the World Health Organization, we've actually got a campaign to challenge that and to retain our sovereignty together. It's another thing that's really essential, that we make the decisions and not have globalists like imposing these measures. And when they pass these rules that says it's a wrongful act and it's terrible behaviour, we're the first industrial nation. That's the thing that transformed the living condition for millions of people in Britain and then around the world. The solution for people around the world and poverty and for being on Delta floodplains and having all sorts of impacts is more and better development, more robust housing, better infrastructure, early warning systems. That's the reason why people get so damaged by things like floods and other issues. And that's the solution to it. So we say it together, no to net zero. We don't like this virtue signalling posturing that can have very, very big impact, like we've seen with the Chagos Islands. And we need to refute partisan promotion of this and assert our own sovereignty. We need to do it together.
Alan, thank you. That's Alan Miller there, who's co-founder of the Together Declaration. Lots of reaction, including Neil, who says, could you please tell Ed Miliband renewable energy is the dearest in the world? Starmer wants to destroy this country. Christina says, Ed Miliband is living in cloud cuckoo land. He is talking a load of rubbish. A great show, says Christina. Pete says, Ted Siliband is a prat and suing the US for climate change. Surely they should be suing India, China and similar. How about we just don't sue each other? How about that? Sue says what this regime is doing is unmitigated theft from the taxpayer. These immigrants should be detained and interrogated independently with no access to lawyers and no legal aid. They should never be given British citizenship, and if they do not disclose their country of origin or lie, they should be imprisoned. And Jane says perhaps if the banner waivers took in a migrant each from the hotel to their home and family, they could practice what they are preaching. We will get more of your opinions in a second. We'll also look back on Hulk Hogan's career. He has died at the age of 71. Stay with us.
Of course, what happened in 1997 or thereabouts was Tony Blair said education, education, education. And some smart and ambitious police officers thought, we'll have a bit of this. And off they went to university to get their degrees. And they came back with their heads brainwashed with pseudo-intellectual Marxist claptrap. And so the police service we have today is unrecognisable from the policing of my era.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, the wrestler Hulk Hogan has died at the age of 71, apparently suffering cardiac arrest at home following hospitalisation a few weeks ago. WWE, the World Wrestling Entertainment, confirmed his death in a statement saying WWE is saddened to learn WWE Hall of Famer Hulk Hogan has passed away, one of pop culture's most recognisable figures. Hogan helped WWE achieve global recognition in the 1980s. We extend our condolences to his family, friends and fans. Well, one of those fans is a regular contributor Matthew Hulbert, who, amongst many other things, is a wrestling fan. Matthew, what do you make of the passing of Hulk Hogan? He was a bit of an icon.
Great to be with you, Peter. Good afternoon. Well, it's sad news, isn't it? And 71 is a comparatively young age. I think we can all agree. But yeah, Hulk Hogan, Terry Bollea, his real name. I don't think there would be the thriving wrestling industry globally without him in the 1980s and 1990s. He was one of the main people responsible, certainly in terms of kind of front of house, actually in the ring itself, who made the sport popular. And, I remember rock and wrestling back in the 80s with MTV and all of that. So, none of the WWE that we see today on Netflix, etc., would have been possible were it not for Hulk Hogan.
What made him so iconic? Because he had the thing where he tore off his shirt. He was a real character. He was involved in politics later on. Maybe we'll talk about that in a second. But in terms of his wrestling, what was it? Why was he so popular? And he was a showman, really. He was such a real character, wasn't he?
Yeah, he absolutely was, and always in the red and yellow, and used to, I remember as a kid in the 80s, he'd talk about saying your prayers and eating your vitamins and all of this, and although I think it's fair to say that in the real person, Terry Bollea's private life, that became a bit chaotic in throughout his life. The fact is, as a wrestling icon, as the character Hulk Hogan, he always seemed to embody good values. That being said, though, he did use his, what they call in the wrestling industry, his sway behind the scenes to ensure that he won more than he lost. As I think everyone knows these days, it's pre-scripted, albeit they have to go in the ring and actually do the moves, and it can be very dangerous. Like any other soap opera, like EastEnders or Coronation Street, etc., the actual storyline is pre-scripted, and I think he knew his power and was prepared to use it to ensure that his character won more than he lost.
And that sort of character of kind of the swagger, the trash talking, as Americans call it, the kind of psychological and character side as well, was he was in many ways, his character and his acting within that role was something that he did to great effect.
He absolutely did, and with Vince McMahon, who became the owner from his father of WWF as it was, WWE as it now is, and of course Vince McMahon, a rather controversial character in of himself. Wrestling isn't short of them, but were it not for them and other people like wrestling legend Ric Flair, we really wouldn't have the WWE, the global entertainment mastodon as it is these days, so very successful.
In recent years, he's been in films. That was sort of really at the height of his fame. Also, he's been involved in politics as well, a big supporter of Donald Trump as well, Matthew. I know that's not your politics, but clearly he still almost to this day, certainly until a couple of years ago when Donald Trump was running for office, he had certainly some influence anyway on the American public. They still listened to Hulk Hogan even into his later years.
I think it was a bit sad, though, and I'm not just saying this because, you know, I'm not a conservative or a Republican, as you'd say in the United States, but actually, you know, I've just been reading someone else commenting that his final appearance on WWE TV, he was quite roundly booed on that occasion, and you know, I'm sorry to raise that today, but it's just
a fact. Yeah.
It's a fact, and I think it's because, Peter, that, you know, that at least half of the WWE's audience, you know, didn't agree with his political stance, and perhaps instead of, obviously perfectly entitled to his opinion, can support who he wants, but I think for part of the wrestling viewership, for the fan base, that did rather perhaps besmirch his reputation. But I think today we can reflect back on those days in the 80s and 90s where he was a real global entertainment force and helped make professional wrestling what it is today.
And what sort of legacy does he leave, do you think, Matthew?
I think that is his legacy. I think all the wrestling we see on our screens today, not just WWE, but AEW and many others too, and indeed British wrestling, which, although not on our TV screens anymore, you know, events still take place up and down the country. I think every kind of professional wrestler today throughout the world will be thanking their lucky stars that Hulk Hogan existed.
Matthew, thank you for that analysis there. Matthew Hulbert, who amongst many other things is a wrestling fan, and that is Hulk Hogan, who has died at the age of 71 after suffering a cardiac arrest at home following hospitalisation a few weeks ago. Hulk Hogan was, we've got the detail here about the police and the emergency services, emergency medical providers called to his home at 9:51 a.m. American time at Clearwater, Florida, and first responders to his home at that stage. He was treated by the Morton Plant Hospital, and then he was pronounced dead, and that is confirmed by World Wrestling Entertainment. They say WWE is saddened to learn WWE Hall of Famer Hulk Hogan has passed away, one of pop culture's most recognisable figures. Hogan helped WWE achieve global recognition in the 1980s. We extend our condolences to Hogan's family, friends and fans. Well, thank you to everybody who's been in touch. Loads of messages coming in, including on that police chief as well. The head of Essex Police, Daz, says he needs to resign. The police did that to get the far right to react. Warren in Lancashire says, if and when reform get in and deportations start to happen, I bet the left-wing protesters aren't as well behaved as the peaceful protesters. Denise says, all this talk about accommodating these illegal migrants is a joke. In France, they're not accommodated. They make do with tents as a country. We are crazy. Anthony in Warwickshire says, when pro-Palestinian demonstrators were happening, the police told Jews who were near that they must leave or their continued presence could be a breach of the peace. But in Epping, where people were protesting against illegal migrants being in a hotel next to their school, the police accompanied Antifa to stir up trouble. Two-tier policing, blatantly biased. Thanks for your good work exposing the far left, says Anthony in Warwickshire. Well, Greg from London has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Greg, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good evening, Peter, and I must say I do enjoy your programmes immensely.
Thank you.
Not at all. And I would say just one thing. In the course of your programme this evening, you've interviewed a number of people who, in inverted commas, are putting the case for Essex Police and the Essex Chief Constable.
Yes.
Which is fine. That's what we need to hear. But there's one question which I wish you'd asked.
Okay.
And I don't think I remember you asking it. All the business about did you escort them? Why did you escort them? Did you bust them? Didn't you bust them? You never once asked why were a number of these people, more than a number, a substantial number, allowed to proceed masked.
Yeah. Okay, listen, do you know what? Hold on a second, Greg. No,
please, let me just finish.
I'm just going to tell you one thing really briefly. I'm going to say that I've literally written down your question. We're talking to Mike Neville, who's the former Metropolitan Police detective, in just a few minutes' time, and I'm going to ask him that exact question, Greg. So if you stay tuned, we're going to ask him. But continue your point. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I love hearing Mike Neville, but the point is, Mike Neville isn't speaking for, in quotes, the established order.
Sure.
I want to know what Essex Police say
Yeah.
about why masked people were allowed to proceed. Because my understanding is, and I'm a retired postman, I don't know about these things, but my understanding is that you can't wear masks.
It's certainly if you're protesting, you can be arrested for wearing a mask. That is an offence. What I would imagine happen, I don't know, Greg, and we're going to ask Essex Police specifically on this mask point. Judy, the producer, is going to get in touch with Essex Police and is going to ask them. And if we get an answer by the end of the show, we're going to tell you what it is.
I do hope I hear their response.
On the
really
mask.
do.
Okay, I'm on tomorrow as well between 4 and 7. If we don't get the answer in the next hour, we're going to make sure we bring it to you tomorrow. Whatever their response is, we will tell you what it is.
I look forward to another one of your programmes, please.
Okay, all right. Greg, thanks. Good points there. Now, what I imagine would have happened, I don't know this, but what I imagine would have happened is that those people would not have been masked when they were being escorted. But we're going to ask Essex Police that. If we get an answer between now and 7, that's great. Jody's on the case already, the producer of the programme, and if we get an answer on that, we'll bring it to you by 7. If not, we'll bring it to you at 4 o'clock tomorrow when we hear from Essex Police. But we're going to ask them specifically what Greg was saying there, and it's a perfectly valid point. Why were a number of these people allowed to proceed whilst wearing masks? And we know that they were escorted. We will get an answer from Essex Police. They may or may not tell us the reason, but I will ask that question, Greg, because as I always say on these shows, they're my show, but it's your show too. And if Greg wants that question asked, we will ask it. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch as well on all the different aspects today. This person says Hamas are using civilians as a propaganda tool. Hamas fighters are not going hungry. That is absolutely correct, Alan. And actually, there was very good footage that was sent to me by a viewer, very shocking footage actually, of Hamas terrorists sitting around eating bananas and bread and all sorts of nutrient-rich food while the people they claim to care about are starving. In terms of the fly that's going around the studio as well, Naledi has been in touch and says, Peter, grab a rolled up newspaper and come at the fly from behind. They take off backwards. That's the only way to hit them. The fly is still alive. It hasn't come into my range, but when it does, its days are numbered. Let me tell you, that fly will be squashed. We're going to talk to Mike Neville in a second. I'm going to ask him the question that Greg once asked. If you have other questions you want me to ask Mike Neville or any other guest, get in touch. 87222 is the number to send me a text on. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Drive. Good evening. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. Essex Police have got back to us already. We will read out that statement in just a second. I'll put some of the points to Mike Neville, who's standing by, the former Metropolitan Police detective. We'll talk to him about everything that's going on in Essex, about the protests that are going to happen tonight, about the masks issue. There's lots to discuss. Also this hour we'll take a sneak peek inside the Sun. Tomorrow we'll talk to their Deputy Head of News, and we'll find out what's going on in America as well, because Ghislaine Maxwell is currently meeting the US Deputy Attorney General, and of course there's the White House hitting back at reports that Trump has been named in the Epstein files. We'll find out what is happening there and get analysis of that as well. Loads of messages and calls coming in. We'll get to as many of those as we can before Kevin O'Sullivan at 7 o'clock. You want to get your voice in the air? You got something on the tip of your tongue? Tell me what it is. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 7. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, Greg gave me a call there literally about 10 minutes ago to talk about the fact that he was wondering why on earth are these people at the Epping protests at the Bell Hotel, why were the counter-protesters allowed to wear masks? Well, we've had, first of all, we have Mike Neville Handley in studio with us, who's a former Metropolitan Police detective. Hi, Mike. Good to see you.
Hey, good evening, Peter.
We have been, we contacted, Jodie, our producer, contacted Essex Police asking the exact question, why were a number of these people allowed to proceed whilst wearing masks? And Essex Police have told us the restrictions around face coverings have only been in place today, and at Sunday's protest, Sunday was the 20th. No such restrictions happened last Thursday, the 17th, and before that, on the Thursday the 17th protest, both protesters and counter-protesters, some elements of them, wore face coverings, not one specific group only. They're allowed to do so, as is their right, if there's no specific legal order against face coverings. So, Mike, could it have been the case that there were protesters who were escorted to this protest from the Antifa, the anti-side, essentially, who were wearing face coverings and the police did nothing to stop them? That could hypothetically be the case.
It is the case, because I've seen the videos where they're getting in minibuses or they're being walked to and from escorted by police. The law is quite clear. What happens is an inspector has to sign a written order saying for the next 24 hours in this particular place, people, if they're wearing a face covering, are ordered to remove it. If they don't remove it, they can be arrested. The question is, why didn't they put those orders in place?
Because that's a simple thing to do.
A simple thing to do. And also,
what sort of rank of officer?
An inspector. An inspector.
So not that high
ranking
officer.
I was a DCI, so yeah. I could have done that. Mm-hmm. But what gets me here is, what does it look like to the public that the police are escorting people who are fully masked up?
I mean, surely, if you're a senior police officer, surely if you're going to escort people and you're going to say, right, you and I probably don't agree with this decision. I certainly don't, and I expect you don't either. But if you make a decision and say, right, we're going to facilitate peaceful protest, we're going to escort people there so they can protest peacefully. If someone's wearing a mask, surely the first thing you do is say, right, we're going to make it illegal to wear a mask, because we don't want you wearing a mask. Because if you wear a mask, I mean, peaceful protesters, in my experience, and I've been to a heck of a lot of protests as a reporter, I know you've been to many more as a police officer, don't wear masks.
Well, exactly. And not only that, but this protest itself is really about mums and dads and families, grandparents saying, we really don't want these asylum seekers who we don't know anything about in a school where our daughters, granddaughters attend. So you've almost got a family atmosphere up to a point. You've got some idiots who will always join in. So why would you allow or bus in people who are thugs, really? They're very politically motivated, wearing these masks. That's intimidation, in my view. It wouldn't have taken anything to put that order in place. But what the thing is, it's the optics. When me, you, people at home, the viewers and listeners here, see on the TV the police escorting people who are fully masked up, who are actually giving lifts to people. What does this look like? It just looks so bad. I mean, trust and confidence in the police is at rock bottom. This nation used to have the best police force in the world. It was the envy of the world, that people trusted the police. They saw them as decent and friendly, firm but fair. And now they see this. It's just appalling in my view.
There's further protest that is planned this evening, Mike. Obviously, we hope that's totally peaceful, but given the atmosphere that is around that, how should the police protest that to make sure that people can have their say?
Well, what they should do is make sure the two groups are absolutely way apart. The first duty of the police is to ensure the king's peace, to make sure there's no trouble. The idea that the police, the Essex police, the assistant chief constable, a man called Hooper, said that it was their duty to facilitate lawful assembly or some old flannel. I've never heard this. What you do if you've got, particularly if you've got one group which consists of mums, dads and grandparents, and then you've got another group which is obviously hard left with their socialist workers side. I mean, they're not giving any clues, are they? Socialist worker and all this. You would keep them far apart. The idea that you would march them in.
And the point is as well that, I mean, police should know about this. They should know, actually, you know, they have lots of... We're told this chief constable has a lot of experience of public order.
I mean,
I have zero experience of policing public order. I have a reasonable amount of experience of reporting public order. Lots of riots in Northern Ireland over a long period of time. What I expect and what I have seen on a number of occasions is you have... Right, here are the one side of the protest. We're going to keep them like a street away from the other people. We're going to allow these people to protest, but we're going to keep them far apart. We're not going to bring them together. We're not going to facilitate something that could escalate into something.
Absolutely.
Especially when people are wearing masks as well. I mean, it's so basic.
But I think what we've got to get into here, you've got to get into the establishment's mindset. And it's like the Keir Starmer mindset. In their minds, the baddies are the people protesting about the hotel. They are the far-right thugs. They are the troublemakers. In their heads, the people who come in with socialist worker signs, like anti-racist they claim to be, and welcome refugees, diversity, etc., they are the goodies. You know, and this is the real problem. And if you look at the Prime Minister, for example, he made a big issue in Southport about these far-right thugs coming in from all over the place and causing trouble when the people of Southport should be allowed to get on with their business. Why isn't he saying the same about Epping? Because the people who are outside protesting about the hostel, I reckon 99% of those come from like within 2 or 3 miles of that hotel. The people who are coming in with their socialist worker signs and the rest of it, they are being shipped in from London and all other places. So why aren't they making the same point about the far left shipping in and causing drama?
Oh, we know why. Greg is back on the line. I've asked Judy again. Judy's busy this evening to get Greg back on the line. Does that, Greg, we've got that information there from Essex Police. We've heard what Mike has to say. Does that illustrate the point for you a bit?
Yeah, it does, and I thank Mike Neville for his expertise and informed comments. I think what Mike Neville has said illustrates the complete lack of control of Essex Police. Because from what Mike Neville has said, I understand that a police officer of sufficient seniority was there on the scene and could have prohibited
yes. Oh, absolutely. That could have happened, Greg, but that decision wasn't made. Greg, I'm going to go back to Mike, but listen, thanks for your comments there. I appreciate that, and I hope we cleared that up for you. And Greg was just making the point there. He was saying a perfectly reasonable point about the inspector perhaps signing that off, and we did talk about that. There are a couple of other aspects to this, Mike, and there are a couple of other things around today that I just want to talk to you about. One of them is shoplifting and this absolutely dreadful set of statistics in regard to shoplifting. I know you've been talking about this today to various other journalists as well. And the point is that it's totally out of control in this country and the police just aren't doing nearly enough to deal with it.
Absolutely. So, but the big problem comes from the Home Office in this sense. So there is the police are measured on how they use fingerprints and DNA, how they gather them, how they use them, how many people have been caught and sentenced because of fingerprints. With shoplifting, billions of pounds have been spent on CCTV, and this is the evidence. But the Home Office do not measure the police's use of CCTV. So all that money's been spent, people are being caught on camera doing all these wicked things, and nothing is done about it. And in the police, what gets measured gets done. So in some police forces, forces, the identification rate of people caught on camera is lower than 10%. It's almost not worth getting the stuff in the first place. But what it says to people, what it says is a tipping point in society where if you go into a shop, everybody around you's stealing.
I was in Greg's the other day. I was having a sausage roll in Greg's. I shouldn't have been having it, but I was. And I was just sitting there eating my sausage roll, drinking my Ribena, and this guy comes in and just starts lifting a load of stuff. And he just walks out, and the guy starts shouting after him, saying, the employee says, you can't take that. And he just says, well, I'm going to. He just walks out.
And what happens is, though, is that... and then what happens, though, there's violence, because these thieves, they feel entitled to steal. So the moment they get stopped and somebody challenges them, there's a fight, and it's just... And this is so organised. What you'll get from a lot of left-wing politicians, the baby milk being stolen. It's tragic that mothers have got children who are not being fed. I spoke to one of the heads of security of the top 6 supermarkets. A lot of that baby milk ends up in Vietnam. It's that organised. Booze is stolen.
It's also a bulking agent for drugs as well. It's not just about feeding babies. It is really expensive. I'm not condoning for a second people stealing baby formation, but it's not formula. But it's not just about feeding babies. Yeah.
Can I tell you what organised is? The best organisation I've ever known about shoplifting. There was a pub in London, very rubbish pub, but the menu was absolutely lovely. You look, but across the road was an M&S, garage. So you would give your order. And there was like the landlord would have 6 drug addicts in the back. He would feed them the order, would go across the shop, steal the food. And so half an hour later, what's on your plate?
Yeah. It'd just be an M&S.
It is just a route cycle, but it's so organised.
Yes.
It's international. It's nationalised. But again, because the police do not have a database of all these images of criminals who commit the crime on CCTV, if you travel from Staffordshire to Derbyshire, if you come down here and go to Sussex and Surrey, it's very unlikely. If you left your fingerprints or DNA, you would be caught. If you leave your image, you probably won't.
That's very interesting.
That's not good.
Very interesting. I just want to ask you one more thing before you go, Mike, which is the story we were talking about a little bit earlier on, this mother who is an activist for Israel and stands up for Jewish people as well, being asked for by Prevent officers to explain ourselves. We spoke to her, Holly, a little bit earlier on. I know you've done an awful lot of counter-terrorism work as well. What's going on there?
Well, I've got to be honest, I was not a counter-terrorism officer. I helped counter-terrorism officers.
Sure.
However, but with this, it's ridiculous. The trouble with Prevent is it's focusing all the wrong things. Everybody knows the real threat is the Islamic terrorist threat, but no one in the establishment really wants to admit this. So they've got to invent the fact that the far right is far worse than that or just as equal, and it's simply not. 90-odd%, 95% of the targets will be Islamist terrorists, and what they try and do is try and counterbalance this by doing ridiculous things. And the other thing as well, though, what does this tell to the Jewish community who are already under threat, feel threatened, don't want to come to London on certain days? I just think for my Jewish friends, I just think it's absolutely outrageous.
Mike, thank you so much. Always good to talk to you. Always learn something when I chat to you. That is Mike Neville, who's a former senior police officer in the Metropolitan Police. Thank you very much for your contribution today. Lots to discuss. Let me know what you think of what Mike said. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Of course, what happened in 1997 or thereabouts was Tony Blair said education, education, education. And some smart and ambitious police officers thought, we'll have a bit of this. And off they went to university to get their degrees. And they came back with their heads brainwashed with pseudo-intellectual Marxist claptrap. And so the police service we have today is unrecognisable from the policing of my era.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Jill's in Cornwall has some thoughts on policing. Jill, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Well, hello, Peter. I don't have any sympathy for the police. It's a strange thing. I've lost faith in both the police and the justice system.
I think you're not alone, Jill, with a number of people contacting us today saying similar things. Why is that, Jill? Tell us your reasoning.
Well, they don't seem to police anymore. They don't seem to do anything anymore where they bring in people who are breaking the law. They seem to have different views on different things. They seem to be very politically driven in the way they deal with the type of justice system that they've got. But then if I was a police person, if I worked for the police, I would be so upset with the justice system, because I think that the justice system has let the police down, because it doesn't matter how long they might chase someone or what they might do to catch someone. The justice system could turn around and put someone in prison for 2 years for saying the wrong thing because it doesn't fit with the government.
Well, you've got to have confidence. They talk about policing by consent, or the consent of the public, and there just seem to be so few times when the police aren't treating everyone, or I should say, where police treat everyone equally before the law and solve crime, really. I mean, we've seen the shoplifting statistics today. We see the fact that they're escorting people in masks to a protest. It doesn't exactly garner a huge amount of faith in the police, these stories.
Well, exactly, and I'm afraid the leaders of these police forces, the top of the stack, the people that actually control the police, are the people that I blame for this, because they've allowed this situation to happen, and we have a situation now where you might see loads of police on the streets, but they're doing nothing to actually sort of, and there's no fairness. I feel that they've taken on the government stand, which is what is this far right, for goodness sake? It's such a load of rubbish. I
think the far right does exist. I think it exists in this country, Jill, but the point is that it's small, and the point is that people who are gathering, unless, look, I'm not going to defend anybody who's breaking the law, but if you're standing outside an Asylum hotel saying, actually, do you know what? It's maybe not a great idea to have all these people in a hotel in our neighbourhood, giving them these hotel places, soaking up a lot of the public services that need to be given to people recently. I mean, that is a perfectly legitimate thing to protest about. Those people aren't wrong. They're not bad people if they're protesting peacefully.
Well, no. And
they're not far right either.
Well, this is it. I mean, we've got to a situation now where if it's declared to be far right, then it's almost illegal and not allowed. I'm sorry, but I have a situation where if I do not feel if I have an opinion and it's different from everyone else in the room, it doesn't matter. It's my right to have my own opinion. And providing I'm not waving a gun around or showing a knife or whatever, I'm entitled to my own opinion.
Well, it's called free speech, and Jill, you're perfectly entitled to exercise it, and especially on this station. Leslie has been in touch as well and says, please stop saying we have free speech in the UK. On talk, yes, we do, but not on the street. And I think Leslie perhaps feels the way that many people do, that there are a lot of things you can't say. Interested in regard to this asylum question as well in Wandsworth. Now, Mark has been in touch from Wandsworth in London. And Mark, you are someone who actually lives in the Wandsworth area, and we have this story as well about asylum seekers in Labour-controlled Wandsworth being given half-price e-bikes, half-price fireworks displays and all the rest of it, the different council things that they can do, that they're given, that your council tax is going towards. If you want to go to it, you've got to pay, but they get it half price. Mark, what do you think of that?
Well, personally, hello, Peter.
Hello there.
I think it's absolutely disgusting. I mean, both my children were born in Wandsworth Borough. They are not allowed, and if you can look it up if you don't believe me, they're not allowed to go on the waiting list for a home. Now, there's a home across the road from us. It was a 3-bedroom house. It was empty for 2.5 years. We got in touch with the newspapers about it. They didn't want to know. No one wanted to know. Phoned the council. They didn't want to know. And then they spent 6 to 8 months on putting an extension on the back, a loft conversion, extra room, and then a Somali family moved in. Mm-hmm. Now, 40 yards from now, through the alleyway, there was another house, 3-bedroom house, empty. What I can't work out is why these migrants are given new homes, right, that have got extensions on the back and loft conversions. Now, we found out that apparently if they're Muslim, they don't have to pay bedroom tax because they need a room to pray in. This is all going on in Wandsworth, and I find it absolutely disgusting that our children, all right, they're in their 30s now, were never allowed to go on the waiting list, but you can have a family come in on the boat or wherever from another country.
Well, Mark, you know,
given handout after handout.
And that is exactly what is annoying so many people in this country. They're not racist. They're not people who shouldn't be saying these things. There's nothing you've said there that isn't true, Mark. What you're telling me is there's this just absolutely fundamental issue of fairness of people who pay their way, who do everything you're meant to do, and then this gets thrown back in your face, Mark, where you're thinking, actually, I quite like my kids maybe to live near me. Maybe they could get on a social housing list, but no.
But the sad thing is, I mean, my daughter is now married. They had to buy a property. Mm-hmm. They had to buy. They've paid into this country. I paid into this country all my life.
Yeah.
But then I became ill about 10 years ago. I can't go into further details. But, like, unfortunately, I'm not allowed to work anymore. I can't work anymore because of a disability.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear that, Mark.
We've got a situation where the council come and repair their kitchen floor. A year later, the floor is all breaking up, and we've phoned the council 6 times. No one is even interested. But yet, if we owe £4 of rent,
they'll soon be on your case, Mark. If you owe anything, listen, that is a salutary lesson, and thank you so much, Mark, for letting us know. Mark in Wandsworth there, and Kevin's been in touch. She says, I used to live in Gran Canaria. I had to prove I could stand on my own 2 feet, and I had to pay for private healthcare because my son was 5 years old and starting school. When we moved back to the UK after 3 years, I had to pay a year's rent up front because I had been out of the country for so long. Anne in Archway says, a group of local mothers, grandmothers and children expressing concern for child safety. Where is the need for balance from Antifa and the Socialist Workers' Party? And one more before we go to our next guest from Zarah, who says, I hope that's how I pronounce your name, Zaira, I'm not sure. I'm 16, goodness knows if two-tier care had the common sense and decency to throw in the towel, or if another election were to be held, I would abuse the pathetic opportunity he's given non-lefty teenagers to smash Labour for good. Also, this Your Party thing, I think that name is an insult to anyone who has any lick of sense. A brilliant person on Twitter, let me just find this, had an example of what he thinks that Jeremy Corbyn and Zarah Sultana's party should be called. Britain Last. Rather than Britain First, Britain Last, which I think is an absolutely brilliant suggestion, because they obviously, Jeremy Corbyn, not a lover of Britain, loves all our enemies, big fan of all our enemies, not a big fan of Britain. Laurie Laird is with us, a US political commentator, because a meeting is underway, we're told, by with the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and Ghislaine Maxwell. They're said to be meeting in Blanche's office in a federal courthouse in Tallahassee in Florida. Earlier this week, the Attorney General of America, Pam Bondi, announced that her deputy planned to meet Ghislaine Maxwell. She, of course, was sentenced to 20 years in prison after being convicted of sex trafficking for a role in recruiting and grooming teenage girls for sexual abuse by Jeffrey Epstein. The question is, of course, what evidence does Ghislaine Maxwell have in this huge controversy after reports that the US President Donald Trump was told in May he was among hundreds of names mentioned in Justice Department documents relating to the late convicted paedophile, the financier Jeffrey Epstein. Laurie, what do you make of the fact this meeting is happening and the fact that Ghislaine Maxwell is involved in this? What is she likely to say?
Hard to say, but I suspect, Peter, that she will not say anything without some kind of reduction in her sentence.
Some sort of deal.
Absolutely. For the first time, Ghislaine Maxwell has a bit of leverage, and I'm sure that she will be desperate to use this. I think the thing, there's so many striking things about this story, but I think the biggest one is that this is an administration that has been really good at distracting attention. I mean, it's hard to report on this administration because there are 17 things that happen before breakfast, right? So many scandals that it's been easy to distract the electorate's attention. They can't seem to do it with this story, and Trump's attempts to distract from this story have been, they've ranged from absolutely foolish to dangerous, accusing the Obamas of treason. Nobody cares anymore, right? The Obamas, the Clintons are regarded as spent political forces. The fight that he has picked with the head of the U.S. Federal Reserve, the central bank, which is coming to a head this afternoon, Donald Trump's going to visit the facility. That's dangerous. This could really, really rattle the financial markets, and that's something that Donald Trump cares about. So these distractions are not having the effect that historically they've had when Donald Trump throws his attention at trying to look over there.
It's interesting as well because for such a long time, Donald Trump was saying that he'd release the files, he'd be transparent about all of this, but at the same time, his personal role has come into focus. And there does seem to me, you're the expert, Laurie, but there does seem to me to be a bit of a disagreement between certain wings of the Republican Party on this.
Yeah. And that is something, I think this is perhaps the biggest lesson to learn from this, that we're finally seeing some members of the Republican Party standing up to Trump. I didn't think that we were going to see this, at least not this side of the midterms. Yeah. I think Donald Trump probably put some noses out of joint when he blamed Republicans for, being a dog with a bone about this story, blamed them on Twitter. I think that probably miffed some of the Republicans, and the spectacle of a House Judiciary Committee subcommittee voting to subpoena records from the Department of Justice, going against the party line, really surprised me. And the Speaker of the House had to cut the parliamentary session a day early to prevent that subpoena from taking effect. This is really interesting, seeing this split in the Republican Party, and particularly at a time that the Democrats have, don't seem to want to get out of a fetal position. It's good wherever you are on the political divide. I think most people can agree that a functioning opposition is probably important to democracy.
Yeah, just clarify the point for us on the House Oversight Committee, this deposition.
Oversight, right? I said judiciary.
No, sure. This is on the 11th. Will this go ahead? Will Ghislaine Maxwell be be in front of this House Oversight Committee on the 11th of August. Is that correct?
They certainly have discussed, bringing in testimony remotely. This will come in during the summer recess, so that committee will have to reconvene. But I think, given the attention and given that Republicans are now willing to stand up to the administration, I think this is quite likely. And of course, Ghislaine Maxwell's people are going to be pushing for this to happen. Now, how credible is whatever she shares? Well, that's kind of an open question, isn't it? I mean, the guy with all the answers isn't with us anymore. I don't think, I'm not surprised that Donald Trump is in any kind of account of Jeffrey Epstein's activities. They ran in the same social circles. They were both, big guys in the New York property scene, in the New York financial scene. So the fact that Trump is mentioned doesn't surprise me at all, and certainly doesn't indicate any sort of guilt. I mean, he's admitted that he was friendly with Epstein, so this isn't necessarily surprising. We haven't any evidence that the men were friendly after about 2004, when they fell out over a property deal. And Trump has said since then that he didn't care for Epstein's behavior when it comes to treating women. Oh, the irony. So there's no evidence that these guys had a particularly close relationship beyond, say, 2004. Sure. So I not clear that Trump has done anything wrong, but look, he's behaving like somebody who has, and I think this is the concern. It may not be what Trump did. Look, Trump has escaped, sexually oriented scandals before, but his behavior now makes people think, what on earth is he covering up?
It'll be fascinating to see what happens, and if Ghislaine Maxwell does give evidence to a House committee, that is going to be absolutely box office. Thank you, Laurie Laird there, US political commentator. Great to talk to you. As always, Laurie, appreciate you joining us on the programme. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including about what Khaled said earlier on. I don't hear people like Khaled demanding the hostages are free. The killings will stop when Israel gets its people back, says Richard in Kettering. Is this the same Khaled that last week said the immigrants should be given 3/4 of Britain for themselves, says Phil in Portsmouth. Phil, yes, it is factually in a court of law. Yes, that is correct. But I think he was making the point that, Khaled, I'm not going to rehearse Khaled's points, but he was essentially saying that there'd be, Israel was a colonialist force, blah, blah, blah. I mean, he's wrong. Leslie says, when is Starmer going to come out from behind flag rape podium, stop grandstanding and address the country and apologise for his failure to smash the gangs? Daryl in Lincoln, I totally agree with Paul who rang in, and I won't use any company or business that might be linked with illegal immigrants. Everyone should boycott them, and it would take a lot away from them, says Daryl in Lincoln. Rachel says, I can't understand Chris, your guest earlier, trying to defend Essex police. The evidence is clear to everyone. That's Chris Phillips there. Ash in Slough says, afternoon Cardi P, the protests in Epping are about child safeguarding from sexual assaults. The counter-protesters are therefore pro-child sexual assault. We can no longer trust the police. Well, Ash, I'm sure the other protesters would say that's not what they are protesting for. I'm sure is they would say they're against racism and all the rest of it, but you're very entitled to your opinion, of course. And finally, before the break, Drew in Lanzarote says, why do the police let anyone in Epping cover their faces? This is the problem in our country. The only one reason to cover your face, you're up to no good, says Drew. Great show, says Drew. We're going to talk to Will Barker in a second, the Deputy Head of News of The Sun, to find out what's coming in the paper tomorrow. They're covering all the stories. I'm sure one of them will be, of course, what is happening in Epping tonight. There's going to be another protest. We will see what happens there tonight, and we will bring you full coverage, of course, here tomorrow. Let's hope it's peaceful. Let's hope there's very little to tell you about. It could go the other way. I hope it doesn't, but we will, of course, continue talking about this. We'll make sure you have your say as well before Kevin O'Sullivan at 7 o'clock, so stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, let's find out what is happening in the Sun tomorrow. Will Barker is with us. He's the Deputy Head of News. Will, great to see you. How are you doing?
Good, yeah, good to meet you. And all good, thank you.
We've been talking. Day. Oh yeah, well, a busy day for us as well. We've been talking a lot about this story. You're talking about the Labour Council giving illegal migrants half-price e-bikes, scooter rides. There's a lot more they're entitled to as well. Things like half-price for soft play areas, for going to fireworks displays. There's an awful lot. We actually spoke to Mark, who lives in Wandsworth, who was saying it's just totally unfair.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. I mean, and this is one element of, you know, I was talking yesterday about this migrant story. I mean, it's the story of the year. It keeps going on. We've got it 145 again tomorrow. We've actually got, there's a special which it's in the hands of the lawyers at the moment, which is being sorted out, and which should be on the front page, which is definitely worth looking at 10 tonight. You mentioned Epping as well. Epping, there's a lot going on there.
You'll be monitoring the protest that's going on there this evening.
Tonight.
Yeah. Let's hope it's peaceful, but we'll see.
And police out all over. Also at Canary Wharf, there's a huge police presence. We've been down there all day because I think they worry that something might be going on down there.
The Britannia Hotel.
Yep. Yeah. So all these guys are coming into the hotels, and now it emerges that when they're in the hotels, we're now giving them a bit of a free ride as well. They as you say, Wandsworth have kind of hatched this deal, 50% off line bikes, all sorts of access for all scheme, all sorts of different freebies here, there and everywhere, free perks and services, and we're just sort of almost rolling out the red carpet for these.
More on that on the Sun tomorrow. And tell us, you've got some more detail on Jay Slater, who, of course, this was a story that really captured a lot of people's imagination. Tragic story.
Yeah, it was. Well, once again, this time last year, we were all sort of fascinated. Terrible story, and I mean, we'll never know what actually happened, but there's some sort of context has now sort of emerged from the court this morning and today. There's some sort of terrible message that he sent to his friend was revealed, in which he said that he was thirsty and he couldn't go back to the Airbnb which he'd started at. It turned out he'd have a huge night out, and the toxicology revealed that he'd been taking cocaine, ecstasy and ketamine, had quite an old night, disappeared with two guys, and then just wandered off into the shrubland, and where unfortunately he was then found dead in June last year.
So more detail on that in the Sun tomorrow. Also very sad news as well about Hulk Hogan. We've been reflecting on that today. There's a political commentator who comes on this station and talks about all things to do from a Liberal Democrat perspective, which we don't often hear on this station, but we do from Matthew Hulbert. He also happens to be a massive wrestling fan.
Right.
So we didn't talk about the Liberal Democrats today, we just talked about Hulk Hogan. Bit of an icon and a political figure in his own right as well.
Absolutely. Him and Trump have been very side by side recently as well. He's 71. It broke this afternoon. TMZ released it this afternoon. And yeah, very sad. I mean, there'd been reports that he'd been unwell in the last few days in Florida, all sorts of things buzzing around. Clearly, I think it's a heart attack. We believe it's a heart attack, but led alive. I mean, this is the second guy this week after Ozzy Osbourne. Yeah, I talked to Jeremy a lot about that yesterday, I mean, we've got a big spread on Obit because there's incredible stories about him.
Tell us some of the stories about Hulk Hogan, because I think there's a lot of people who would have had Hulk Hogan kind of in their mind's eye. They would know, right, he's that guy, you know,
I think
takes the shirt off and all the rest of it.
I mean,
he's a sort of larger than life kind of character, but really WWF and then WWE wrestling just wouldn't have been the same without him.
I mean, he was, growing up, I remember he was the face, and wrestling then was, I think, possibly a lot bigger maybe than he is now, I don't know, but as a kid growing up, he was the face. I mean, he was like the Pele, the Magic Johnson of wrestling, really. He was wrestling, but then behind the scenes, there was lots of allegations of drug use, but he pushed the sport around the world, and it became
quite a powerful figure within wrestling as well, actually, because he could demand, because we know it's all staged, and he could demand the storylines had him winning and so on, and also a career with film career as well. He starred in a few films and so on. Quite an icon.
Absolutely, I mean, he worked very closely with Vince McMahon. They pushed him, incredible life.
Certainly. Well, that's Hulk Hogan, who will be paid tribute to, certainly, in the Sun tomorrow. Tell us a bit as well about the TV cop who starred in The Bill, who then helped police officers apprehend a runaway thief. Tell us about this.
This is my story of the day. It's absolutely incredible. The Hampshire Constabulary dropped a video this afternoon.
I think we can actually watch the video now. This is of Jeff Stewart, who played the legendary PC Reg Hollis. And just talk us through this here.
So, this is a sort of a shopping centre, I think in Southampton, and a cop here has been trying to arrest a shoplifter. Took 200 quid's worth of gear, but he wrestled away, and they had to pin him down at this car park. And then all of a sudden, the passerby helped him out, and it turned out it was Reg Hollis from the bill.
So they were having trouble pinning him down,
yeah.
And then Reg comes, a PC Reg comes in. Let's just play the video again if we can, because this is the TV cop. He starred in the bill for 24 years. Jeff Stewart, he played Reg Hollis, and he came to the aid of police officers, helped them make this arrest, and he sprinted after a shoplifter, sat on his legs as the officer directed. I mean, that is brilliant.
As he turns to him, he said, "Well, I was in the bill for 24 years."
One of the police officers said, "Can I have a photo with you afterwards?"
He could have read him his rights. I mean, he probably
would have known.
Knew.
He would have known. Yeah, that is fantastic. I mean, I remember seeing him interviewed on TV at one stage, and he was just on TV for such a long time, from 1984 to 2008. I used to be a huge fan of the bill as well. So that's a great story. That's a great story. What's the headline for that one?
Oh, I don't know. I can't remember. I think it's quite straightforward. I think it was just a Bill Star or something.
Oh dear!
No, there's no
for
play.
some sort of some Your Next Sunshine or something like that.
No.
But yeah, Will, thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming in. That's Will Barker. There is the deputy head of news at The Sun. Lots more in the paper tomorrow, including something they're cooking up. They're talking to the lawyers about it at the moment. We sometimes have to do that when we have stories coming. We talk to our legal colleagues behind the scenes, because there's always a lot of controversy about what we tell you, but we got to make sure that it's legally watertight and that we tell the truth, because we are the home of common sense and the home of free speech. We've got to make sure what we say is accurate. So, Will, thank you. Thank you also to Tom in Pontypridd in Wales, who says, how can any country or state sue the UK for reparations for climate change? How can any state prove it was caused by us? I think that's a very, very good point. Another person says, the UK sued for climate change. How about paying those who suffered with infected blood and those who suffered the post office scandal? You're absolutely right, and we need to get that money to those people. They are quite literally dying off. And Mick in Wallington says, we are now witnessing an aggressive, desperate socialist state acting against a beleaguered, hoodwinked population who've woken up to the deception. Well, on that positive note, we'll go to a break. We'll take some calls in just a minute. If you want to get your call in between now and Kevin O'Sullivan's show at 7 o'clock, the number is 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
if you want to know what's really wrong with this country, fundamentally the decision was taken beginning in the 1960s to abolish the idea of personal responsibility, to explain all crime as some kind of reaction to bad social conditions or abuse or whatever it might be, and to cease to enforce law as law is to cease to get rid of the old concept of punishment. The working maxim of the prison system in this country used to be the due punishment of responsible persons.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is...
Well, thanks everybody who has been in touch, including Lorraine on Twitter, who says, what did Essex police say about the protesters wearing face masks? Lorraine, I will repeat it. We're speaking to Mike Neville at the start of the hour, but the restrictions around face coverings, Essex police say, have only been in place today, and at Sunday's protest, that was on the 20th, of course, no such restrictions last Thursday the 17th, and before that, at Thursday the 17th protest, both protesters and counter-protesters, some elements of them wore face coverings, not one specific group only. They're allowed to do so, as is their right, if there are no specific legal orders against face covering. So, Lorraine, I think what Mike was saying there is an inspector or above in the police can decree, right, there's a protest here, what we're going to do is say that masks can't be worn. That didn't happen last Thursday. No inspector decided to do that. Should Essex police have done that? Probably. They didn't. And then when they were escorting those protesters, well, some of them were wearing face masks, but that wasn't against them. I mean, I think the first thing you should do if you see people wearing face masks is say, you can't wear a face mask. We are making a decision, because someone wearing a face mask at a protest is not up to any good. If you're going to a protest, you shouldn't have to hide your face. You should be someone who, if you're protesting peacefully, you've nothing to worry about being caught on camera or whatever, because you're there legally and at a legal protest. So I think that's fairly straightforward. So I hope that clears that up for you, Lorraine. Thanks to everybody else who's been in touch. Andrew Burton says, Peter, when the police took the knee to the Black Lives Matter rioters, today's events were born. The police set a precedent for themselves. Their leaders are now politically motivated with a total bias to the left. They don't have the good grace to hide it anymore. And Paul in Worcester says, I feel like a second-class citizen in my own country. For the first time in my life, I feel the government doesn't have my best interests at heart, but would rather virtue signal by providing support to those who've never contributed to Britain. I just hope we can turn a corner at the next election. This is a living nightmare. No wonder British people are furious, says Paul in Worcester. Cass says, calling us far right is giving these people a green light to abuse our women and kids. I'm so sick of the word racism. People are blind and conveniently deaf. That word has damaged this country and the lives of thousands of kids because everyone is frightened of that word. It just doesn't wash with me anymore. Cass, I think racism is an overused word. I think there are people saying things are racist that aren't racist, and I think we need to be really careful about how we use that word, because racism is something that's awful, shouldn't happen, but so few things that people say, you know, those people at this protest tonight, they're not racist, they're not far right, they're people who care about their community. If they break the law, I'm happy for them to be arrested and for them to face the full force of the law, but they're not breaking the law, they're protesting, they're making their voices heard. Let's hope they do so peacefully tonight. Let's talk about Robert in, Robert in Sussex. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Robert, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter. Hi, thank you. I'll just make a brief point and then return to the one that I made with your team. I would just like to say in general, I think, I was saying the other day, I think it's a very odd situation in the UK where I myself will go on a car journey and I will find a journey going through the Blackwall Tunnel stressful. I now have to pay a £4 charge. The payment system doesn't always work. There's a draconian fine of £90, or 180 if you don't pay it. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is when I sort of sit in my home and I sort of go, do you know what, the idea of jumping in a little rubber boat and going to France from Beauchamp Harbour seems far absolutely delightful than just getting my car and travelling in my own country. You know, there's been a really balmy situation for some time. Really balmy. And this is, you know, the point I really rang was to make with this. I think in 2020, when a lot of these hotels were forced to close, a lot of the managers were probably very happy towards the end of that year to start to getting them functioning in some way. So they would have been quite happy to make deals with government to get them working in some capacity.
Well, most, not all, but most hotel owners care about profit. They care about occupancy and being full. And if you can say, right, we're going to give you a contract, you're not going to get £425 a night, but let's say we give you £100 a night or £85 a night or whatever, and your hotel is going to be full 365 days a year. You're going to have lots of people who have money to pay for, some money anyway, to pay for extra things. And to pay for extra food and so on. Most hotel owners, not all of them, and I actually do know a small hotel owner in the Lake District who said no to that, but there are many hotels, especially the big brands, who would say, bring it on.
Yeah, absolutely. And wow, you really know your stuff there. You know the detail, which is good. I mean, the thing is, I think that the problem is some of these hotels are very functional. And some of these hotels are very beautiful, and I'm sure some of the owners of them had a real investment in them as a labour of love. They just, they probably love these places. But as this migrant scheme that government hatched went on and on, a bit like, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, that suddenly became face loss in August and tears and then a second lockdown, obviously this asylum scheme got out of hand. And imagine some of these hotel owners themselves would just thought, well, this is easy money. My hotel itself might wash their hands of it.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, the reason I want to call, I think the hotel owners needs to be reached out to and say, look, what do you feel about the direction of travel here? Do you want to look after your hotel again? Where is it going?
I think all of those are really good points, Robert, and I thank you for them. Appreciate thoughtful points in that call. Appreciate that. Mark in Lincolnshire is with us as well and has some thoughts on migrant protests. Mark, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi there, Peter.
Hi there.
Excellent show as ever, my friend.
Thank you.
Yeah, the migrant protests, I think, because coming from the angle, if what happens or what people are talking about happening actually happens, which is, there's a lot of chatter on social media about organising, a mass anti-migrant hotel protest, in every, coordinated at every migrant hotel in the entire country. I think this is a really bad idea. I think people need to be really careful what they wish for, because if you do this, the way I see it, they shut down a hotel. What happens? Right now, you shut down one hotel, they move to another hotel.
Yeah. Or they move into social housing. Well, Mark, I actually spoke to, I don't know if you saw it actually, I spoke to Steve Reid, the Environment Secretary, on Sunday, and he said, we're using fewer hotels. And the reason they're using slightly fewer hotels is because they're putting them into they're putting asylum seekers into social housing.
100%, Peter. I did see that. This is the fear with this, as far as I'm concerned, because what will happen is, if they were, for example, in my mind, because I say this because there have been some councillors that have started talking about this as well now, which is, if they did this, if they suddenly shut all these migrant hotels and start filtering them into social housing and private rent, that's not going to be sufficient.
Yeah.
With the existing populace that are already, looking for those homes as well.
It's so many issues within this. It's the processing, it's the fact that they're not being processed quickly enough, they're arriving very quickly. And this one in, one out thing is only going to deal with, it's 1 in, 17 in, 1 out as well.
Well, absolutely. This is the thing, isn't it? Because they're not showing any sign whatsoever of slowing it down. In actual fact, it's accelerating. And what's going to happen, which is what I've seen a few councillors starting to raise about this, and that is the prospect of a similar Homes for Ukraine scheme for migrants. If they suddenly shut all the migrant hotels, Peter, at the very least, I think you might start expecting some councils might start forcing social tenants, social housing tenants, if they've got a spare room. Now you're having a migrant.
Interesting.
I think that's
I wonder if they could do that, Mark. But it's a very, very interesting thought. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks also to Bill, who says the rank and file police are just like the forces. They do as instructed from above. Do not blame the ordinary coppers who in the main work hard and diligently, says Bill Groombridge from Crowborough. So apologies, my English geography is terrible. Joanna in Salisbury says, hi Cardi P, I laughed the other day. The 16-year-old Labour giving 16-year-olds the vote. Both my granddaughters are mesmerised by Nigel Farage. They're 14 and 16 years old now. Thanks also to Mark in Selby, who says, I do hope that anyone who supports the protests outside immigrant hotels just keeps calm and non-violent. The protests should self-police to avoid any confrontation, because Labour and the police have nowhere to go if the crowd behaves and does not get wound up by the Antifa mob. A few people as well that talking about the interviewee we had a little bit earlier on. Glyn says this woman who went to Israel, she proves that Prevent is completely captured by the blob and should be disbanded immediately. What an absolute shambles this country has become, and far worse with this government of amateur, almost an insult to that word, ideologies. Frank says, even if we achieve net zero tomorrow, do you believe the electricity companies would lower their bills? There would never be any lowering of bills, as the energy companies would keep charging us more for the infrastructure and maintenance. And thank you to Jane, who says the science isn't settled on climate change. By the time there's a cut in energy bills, most of us will be dead due to freezing, as we cannot afford it. On a brighter note, Stephen says,